Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 20, Sorrow of History, Rage of Present. It is said that it is far easier to kill someone than it is to simply capture them. This lesson was being relearned by Kairaku Shunsui as he worked with his old friend, Yukitake Jushiro, and the ex-Espada Nellio II Oderschwank. Siro Metrolita. Stark barked out, firing hundreds of Siros at once from his two guns, attempting to overwhelm them. Once again, Jushiro and Nellio jumped in front, and mere moments later, all of Stark's attack had been redirected back towards him. However, Stark had gained his position as the Primera Espada for good reason. He'd soundlessly used Sonido to get behind them, attempting to knock out at least one of his opponents. Shunsui had other ideas as he countered the Espada with Kaiden Kayakatsu, before slashing his swords across his body in opposite directions. Bushigoma. Stark was taken by surprise when blades of wind erupted from the Shinigami's two blades and merged, forming a sharp spinning circle of Ryatsu-infused wind. Blocking with one of his pistols, he aimed the other and fired a Siro straight through, diffusing the attack. "You'll have to do better than that," he called out with narrowed eyes. "Stark, look out!" Lilinette's panicked voice came from one of the pistols. He reflexively Sonido'd a distance away, narrowly avoiding being struck in the back of his head from Nellio's lance. Seeing her obvious pain at fighting him, his eyes softened somewhat. Stark understood, he felt the same pain himself, fighting a former comrade and friend of his. But he owed Aizen everything for freeing him from the hell that is loneliness. Despite his feelings on the matter, Stark knew that if this fight continued much longer, he would lose, and he couldn't afford that. He sheathed his pistols and absorbed Lilinette further into his body. "Time to take things up a notch, Stark." Her voice echoed in his, "No," their head. "Yes." "Then let's go, Stark," Lilinette spoke softly from within their shared body. With that, the combined being of Stark and Lilinette gathered their power. The three opponents were stunned at seeing hundreds of grey wolves materialize behind Stark. Of course, Shunsui put it best. "Huh. That's new. Nellio, what can you tell us about this?" "I don't know, I've never seen him go this far," the green-haired Arrancar admitted. "We don't like rejoining to this point," Lilinette explained with Stark's mouth, distinguishable using her own voice. "It makes it more painful to separate again. But for the sake of companionship, any pain is worth escaping loneliness," Stark finished, his expression hardening. "I'll ask again. Nellio, please retreat. If you continue to fight, I can't guarantee your life." "You know I can't do that, Stark," the former Espada trace reminded him sadly, but just as determined. "I can't let you help Aizen sacrifice an entire town of innocents just so he can ascend to a greater power. Let me make you the same offer. Please surrender, and come with me back to Hueco Mundo. I'll be your companion, you won't have to be lonely anymore." "You know I can't do that, Nell." The Primera answered in the same tone. "I should have known that would be your answer. You're so kind-hearted, you hate unnecessary death and fighting in general. But you must understand. How could I live with myself if I turned my back on the man who gave me my heart's desire?" He sighed. "It seems there is no other way." Nellio nodded in sorrow. "I know." Shunsui fidgeted a little, uncomfortable at witnessing such a personal moment. He felt as though this wasn't his battle at all, but Nellio's. A quick glance in Yukitake's direction told him that his chronically ill friend felt the same. It was getting harder to think of the two as hollows with Shinigami powers, when they acted so very human. Shunsui couldn't even bring himself to take advantage of the opening their conversation made to strike. He tried to give himself a quick pep talk. "I am a Taicho. My sword strikes with the weight and strength of duty." But Kaiden Kayakatsu felt so heavy, her blades dulled with reluctance. Even her usual enthusiasm to play her deadly games was diminished. "Ah, who am I kidding? I want those two to have a happy ending. Yamaji's gonna have my hide for this." Shunsui muttered under his breath. "Mine too," Jushiro agreed. Letting such a powerful Arrancar go without really trying to slay it? He'll burn us alive. But it's the right thing to do. Think we can blame it on the Kurosaki kid? He's already recruited a few of Eizen's Espada. Shunsui mused, his eyes glittering with amusement. Shunsui, don't go causing trouble for him when he's done nothing wrong. But the white-haired Shinigami was smiling. A sudden rise in Ryatsu from Stark and Nellio alerted them that it was time to resume the battle. Gripping Kaden Kayakatsu's blades, Shunsui leapt into the fray. What game shall we play, darling? Let's play Iruni. Kaden Kayakatsu decided. Shunsui chuckled lightly. This is gonna be interesting, with the additional players. That's why I chose it. Having little choice, the normally laid-back Shinigami called out the name of the game that they were all forced to play now. Iruni. Familiar with his friend's Shirkai, Jushiro immediately called out, White. He promptly began a furious assault on his opponent, who dodged and blocked every attack before leaping back, sending several wolves to attack the Taicho. Trying to end it early, old friend? Perhaps that's wise. Aizen is still waiting. White. Shunsui called out, intercepting one of the gray wolves and striking on an odd white spot. He struck with Kaden Kayakatsu, wounding it. However, much to his surprise, the damage was regenerated nigh instantly. But something about the way it had regenerated bothered him. It's not like hollow high-speed regeneration. Shuansui's eyes widened as he realized what it reminded him of. It's like it's made of flame. The wolves are made of fire or something, he warned. They regenerate if you strike physically. Indeed. Our wolves are fragments of our soul, Stark explained. Soul fragments, imbued with Ryatsu, which gives us the ability to direct them all. They have no body, so they cannot be physically hurt. Now that I have explained that, why are you calling out colors? Stark queried with mild interest. My Zanpakuto's power is the ability to force children's games into battle. I don't get a choice in what game is played. Kaden Kayakatsu enforces her rules on everyone within reach of her Ryatsu. If you win, you live. If you lose, you die. Iruni is a colors game, you can only harm someone on the color that you call beforehand, and you can only call the one color at a time, Shunsui explained. If you hit someone on a color that you didn't call, then no damage is given. I see. In that case, black, the Primera decided. But against so many of you, I'm glad that my wolves are on my side. Shunsui blinked, he'd almost forgotten about the pack of spirit wolves directly behind Stark. This could get messy. Thanks, Kaden Kayakatsu. Iruni may just save our lives. I have a reason for choosing every game we play, it's not my fault if you don't grasp it immediately. You should call me out more often. The Taicho sighed to himself with a small smile. Kaden Kayakatsu liked her games, but Shunsui didn't particularly care for having the rules of battle change on the whim of a bored Zanpakuto spirit. He hardened his eyes, steeling his resolve as he faced the horde of wolves. Jushiro struck then, attacking some of the white parts of the light gray wolves. He struck one, only to be surprised by an explosion as it spontaneously combusted, no longer able to regenerate. He escaped from the smoke mostly unscathed, and began repeating the process with the other wolves. Careful, they explode. Got it. Gray. Nellio called, before firing a Siro directly at one of the wolves. It hit, but did only superficial damage before the wolf regenerated. She frowned, her Siro should have done far more than that if the Shinigami was to be believed, unless there's more to this Iruni game than what the Shinigami has revealed. There has to be a way to inflict more damage in this game of his. She didn't notice Stark frown thoughtfully, having observed her attempt. He too felt that Nellio was more than powerful enough to defeat several of his manifested wolves with a Siro, and that it didn't work bothered him. However, it was the childlike mind of Lillinette who gave him the answer. She had always been clever at games, and this was the last piece of the puzzle. The snowy-haired Shinigami, with a white Taicho's Haori, had called the color white, and had struck at a white spot on one of their wolves, obliterating it, while Nellio, who had no gray on her, had done similarly but failed to do much. The color you call out tells where you can strike, but maybe the amount of it you have on you tells how much damage you do. That would make sense, Stark agreed. It's good then that I wear black pants. However, the wolves are apparently not enough. We must join the attack. Agreed. With a moment of focus, Stark generated a sword made of his Ryatsu in his right hand, and lunged at Shunsui. If I can eliminate him, then I can finish off the other without issue, and knock out Nellio. Meanwhile, Jin and Ichigo kept fighting, neither gaining any traction on the other. Ichigo had refused to use his hollow mask for this fight, wanting to save his energy for Aizen, but that decision was being sorely tested at the moment. Tensa Zangetsu held Jin's Bankai on the flat of its blade, having extended faster than the eye could see. While Ichigo was heartened to see Jin's surprised face, he was thinking furiously, trying to come up with a way to counter the insane speed of Jin's Zanpakuto. Kamishini no Yari, Ichigo breathed, trying to buy time. The name of your Bankai reveals it all. The length of your Bankai was never the most frightening aspect of it. It's a spear, a god-killing spear. The reason you told me the length your Bankai could reach was to distract me from its true deadly power, the speed with which it extends. You're a really creepy kid, you know that. Jin repeated his words from mere minutes ago. You're a human teenager, but you're the first to figure out my Bankai. Too bad everyone knows how your Bankai works. The power of Bankai, compressed into that blade in your body, allows you to move at speeds you shouldn't be capable of. It's the only reason you were able to block, and only as a fluke. Let's see how you do with this. Without warning, Kamishini no Yari was back to the length of a dagger, the hilt of which Jin held firmly against his chest. Buto. Incoming. Cazador screamed at him, echoing Ichigo's instincts as his eyes barely caught the extension of Kamishini no Yari. Fast. The wizard registered, swinging Tensa Zangetsu. To Jin's shock, he had batted away the attack again with one hand. Taking immediate advantage of the opportunity, Ichigo's left hand rose up, index and middle fingers extended in the direction of Jin's head. If anything is faster than that sword, it's lightning. Heido 4, Byakurai. Jin managed to dodge to one side, evading the attack, but what Ichigo caught was that his foe had instinctually retracted his Zanpakuto and that his evasion now had it away from his chest, and pointing to the left side. Flickering into Shuinpa, Ichigo appeared to the right side of Jin, slashing with all his might. The traitor barely managed to twist and block with his Kamishini no Yari, but was surprised when he saw a tiny crack appear in his sword. No. He leapt back, bringing his sword back to his chest. Buto, Renjin. Oh shit. Against the onslaught of Jin's repeated Buto attacks that attacked faster than he could see, Ichigo found himself doing a variation of what he'd done against Byakuya's Senbonzakura Kagyoshi back in Soul Society, standing still, focusing his speed and Ryatsu to his arm. Ichigo stood still and forced his arm to blur into hundreds of blocks, Kamishini no Yari either being blocked by the blade of Tensa Zangetsu, or being batted to the side where it wouldn't hit him. He suffered a few minor nicks to his legs, but he was mostly unharmed. Finally, Jin's attack was finished and Ichigo took a moment to breathe. Zangetsu, let me just say, DMN, am I glad you're my Zanpakuto. I'd have been a goner without you. Okay, credit where it's due, that was Fenji impressive. Kick his butt, king. Nias, Jin complimented. I've never seen anyone come out of that attack as unscathed as you. That Bankai of yours is really something. Even with my sword on the offensive, it still feels like it'll break at any moment against yours. I don't get it, Ichigo confessed. That last attack aside, you don't really seem to be trying to kill me. Why would I? I'm only keeping you occupied, the fox-faced ex-Taicho confessed easily. Aizen Taicho's interested in fighting you, but he needs to take care of the pests. Ichigo's eyes widened in realization before he narrowed them, anger and determination dominant in his emotions. He raised and pointed Tensa Zangetsu at Jin, his body turned to the side as he looked down his arm straight at Jin's eyes. Then I can't afford to waste any more time on you. DMN straight you can't, Ichigo. The wizard was shocked when a familiar bald Shinigami jumped in front of him. Ikaku. I've got Jin team, Ikaku declared. You go take down the ringleader. Do you really think you can take down his Bankai with just your Shirkai? Ichigo barked, gesturing towards Ikaku's Zanpakuto, Hozukimaru. It was currently in its Shirkai form, as a spear with a small but very sharp blade on the end. No, Ikaku agreed easily. If there's anything I've learned from being defeated by that Arankar from earlier, it's that when it comes to this battle. His Ryatsu began to build, manifesting in a crimson light around him. The stakes are too high to hold back. It doesn't matter whether anyone's seen this if we're all dead. Bankai. The red light flared, reaching up to the sky with the immense pressure of Ikaku's Ryatsu. When the light faded, Ikaku wielded 3 ridiculously large blades, all connected by an enormous chain. He held an oversized Chinese monk's spade, and a gigantic guandao, each having the traditional red horsetail tassel attached to the hilt. Behind his back, apparently floating, was an axe-like blade with a parallel handle hovering behind Ikaku's head. It also held a faded red Chinese dragon crest as an emblem. Ryuman Hozukimaru. What a beautiful speech, Yumachika's voice came from behind Jin, making him spin around. How did I not sense him there? The traitor thought in surprise. He's not even a Fukutecho. A beautiful speech, Yumachika repeated, gripping his unreleased Zanpakuto tightly. Ichigo, go. We have this handled. Ichigo needed no further prompting, and promptly shunpaed away. Jin let him go, seeing as he now had 2 new challengers. How interesting. I didn't know you had Bankai, he commented. It's not something I advertise, Ikaku answered with a manic grin. I don't want to be taken away from Kenpachi's squad. Now let's get to it. He lunged at his opponent with a fierce battle cry. Renji waited at the ready, holding the hilt of Hihio Zabumaru as he watched Aizen plow into the ground from a tackle from the head of his mighty bone snake and a second Hikatsu Taiho. He could not help but take vindictive pleasure in it, after Aizen had DMN near killed him in Soul Society during his escape, had almost succeeded in killing Rukia, and had mentally broken Hinamori Momo. The unknown wizard who had been fighting him sidled over and whistled at the damage. Several buildings had been destroyed as Hihio Zabumaru smashed Aizen through them before plunging him into the ground. That's pretty good, he commented. Name's Shinji. Renji, the tattooed man answered absently, calling back his Bankai to coil around him protectively, waiting for the dust to clear. It was too dangerous to dive into a situation you couldn't see, not for an opponent of Aizen's strength. Hope that hurt, you conniving piece of sheet, he muttered. He knew that Aizen hadn't died from just that. It'd be too much to hope. So, not that I mind the assist, but why'd you decide to take him on? Shinji inquired. Does it matter? Renji murmured. Let's just say that he's hurt too many of the people I care about for me to be able to leave this to someone else. Ah. Shinji nodded. I can understand that. It's about the same for me. The dust finally cleared, revealing an apparently unharmed Aizen. However, the top of his coat had several holes and tears, and it had been almost completely burned off on the back from Renji's Hikatsu Taiho attacks. After a moment, when it appeared that they weren't chasing after him, Aizen shunpaed up to them and began clapping in a slow, slightly mocking manner. Very impressive, Abarai Renji, he complimented. Your efforts are futile, of course, but you've grown much stronger in the time I've been away. DMN it. That was our strongest attack, and I caught him off guard. Renji lamented. Do not worry, Hihio Zabumaru reassured him. We did more damage than you think. The bone snake fixed its eyes upon its enemy, letting out a dangerous hiss. I don't see how. Then Renji saw it. The injury Aizen had received earlier, when attacked by Shinji, it was gone. He healed himself while in the dust. Either that or he's using his Dmet illusions to make it look like we did nothing. You're gonna die today, Aizen. Aizen smiled. So I've been told. But if I do, it will not be by your hand. We'll see about that. Let's go, Hihio Zabumaru. Renji swung his handle at Aizen, directing his Ryatsu through his Bankai, and Hihio Zabumaru lunged at Aizen. Such a straightforward move. The lead traitor sighed. Perhaps I was wrong about your growth. He reached forward to grab the Bankai by the tooth, quite literally, but was surprised when the bone snake suddenly twisted, veering away before it began circling around him, obscuring his vision. Oh. Within seconds, he was surrounded by the coiled form of Hihio Zabumaru, sharp-looking extensions from each segment all aimed directly at him. I see. You plan to either stab me from all sides at once, or crush me directly. Inventive use of your Bankai, Renji, I applaud you. You have obviously learned much from facing Kuchiki Byakuya's Bankai. But not enough. Heido 63, Raikoho. The enormous lightning blast annihilated 3 segments of Renji's Bankai, disassembling the remaining segments, making them start to fall to the earth below. I think you're the one who hasn't learned enough from our fight, Aizen. Renji roared. Higa Zeko. The segment stopped in midair, glowing with Ryatsu, before they began flying directly at Aizen as fast as Renji could make them. Aizen finally drew his sword, and almost casually sliced at the first segment that came near. However, when it met no resistance, his eyes widened. It was only then that he saw, out of the corner of his left eye, Shinji grinning and holding up his Zanpakuto. Sheet. But it was too late. He'd been impaled through the back by the protrusion on a large segment, and it was sticking out of his stomach. Whoa. Renji blinked. Was that it? Did I seriously just land a critical blow to Aizen? But then, Aizen cut off part of the protrusion, an annoyed look on his face. He then flared his Ryatsu, twisted his sword around so he held it in a reverse grip, and then stabbed under his arm, into the segment of Hihio Zabumaru that had struck him. It shattered in an instant. I underestimated you. That won't happen again, he told the pineapple-haired Shinigami. But right now, you're wide open. It happened in an instant. One moment, Renji was at full health, readying himself for another attack. The next, Aizen was somehow behind him, and Renji's chest was sliced open, blood spurting through the air. He looked down at his torso in disbelief, even as he began to fall. Then he looked to his right, where Shinji was, and saw that the wizard had suffered a similar fate. Shinji, your Zanpakuto's power is merely an optical illusion. Your positions were never changed, it was only my perception of them. Once someone gets used to it, your power is child's play. Is this, the extent of our strength, Zabumaru? Renji asked, time slowing to his perception as he fell. We fought well, and landed an injury that will help the others. Now rest. Renji was about to do just that and pass out, but then a stray thought passed through his head. What of everyone else? They may die. No. I cannot afford to rest. I cannot afford to die. I cannot afford to give up when my friends need me. With the strength of his renewed resolve, Renji caught himself, stopping his fall with the airwalk technique. Inoue-san. She'll heal me quick again, and then I can rejoin the fight. But it went against his pride to just run. He stood his ground and coiled Hihio Zabumaru around him, blood running in rivulets down his chest and legs. He glared up with all his power at Aizen's back. Once more, Hihio Zabumaru, he whispered. Let's do this one more time. Let's go. Howl, Hihio Zabumaru. Hikatsu Taiho. The giant bone snake lunged once again at Aizen, who half-turned to face the threat. With a single sword swipe, Hihio Zabumaru's head had been cut in half, and the Hikatsu Taiho exploded in a flare of red Ryatsu. When the dust cleared, Aizen stood there, completely unharmed. Hihio. Zabumaru. Even Renji's thought seemed like a whisper. No. But it was true, Renji knew it even as his sword reverted to Shirkai. Zabumaru would need time to recover, or some healing from a particularly skilled woman he knew. I'll get you recovered in no time. Ignoring the pain of his injuries, he fled to the healing station in Urahara's tent. Aizen, a female voice screeched. Baka Shinji, why the hell did you try to fight him alone? I didn't fight him alone, Hiyori. But don't attack on your own, he's too strong. The blonde glared at Shinji even as he struggled to get to his feet. I know that. Oh. Are you worried that she'll die? Aizen taunted. No matter. Regardless of whatever you may do, the ending is the same. Besides, she has nothing to fear. She and all the rest of you died on that night over 100 years ago. Hiyori screamed her fury as she broke Shinji's grip on her leg and lunged at Aizen, drawing her hollow mask at the same time. Chop cleanly, Kobikiri Orochi. Her sword warped, becoming a large cleaver almost as tall as she was, with a serrated saw-like edge. Time to get revenge for what you did to us, Aizen. Kamura barely dared to breathe in the darkness of Tosen's Bankai. In the absence of any stimuli save that of touch, he couldn't afford to be distracted even for a moment. He stood perfectly still, waiting for the moment he knew where his opponent was. And in that moment, a counterstrike. The fur on the left side of his face shifted subtly thanks to a change in the air, and that was enough. He struck. Except there was no resistance. He'd hit nothing but air. Kamura had anticipated this. Tosen had discovered the weakness of his own Bankai at the same time he had. Of course he'd worked to eliminate the problem, that being his own speed. However, speed had a necessary side effect, the displacement of air. In his heightened sense of touch in lieu of his other senses, his training with Kenpachi was paying dividends. Kamura's face shifted to a grim satisfaction as he tracked his old friend, following him from the gentlest feeling of air brushing his fur as Tosen moved out of the way of Kamura's attack. For once in his life, the anthropomorphic canine was glad for his inhuman characteristics. I know where you are. And that simple knowledge made Kamura smile grimly, revealing his fangs. Even so, he didn't attempt to follow the traitor. It was difficult enough to track someone while standing still, moving around would make him lose track of Tosen. It once again came down to a counterattack, or wearing Tosen down through maintaining his Bankai. Kamura waited, carefully keeping his attention on his only sense remaining. Even so, the complete darkness and lack of any other sensory input practically invited him to think about his situation. It's not Tosen's style to make his opponent wait. He doesn't have as much Ryatsu as many of the other Taicho, he always preferred a clean, quick defeat. Kamura frowned pensively. He's buying time. But for what? A secret weapon? He had not even a moment to consider the idea, as he suddenly felt the cold steel of a Zanpakuto against his fur and skin. Instinct took over, and Kamura twisted out of the way, taking a shallow gash to his abdomen even as he swung Tenken. He missed, as expected, but he'd also swung his left arm up at where he knew Tosen's neck was, gambling that the traitor would be too preoccupied with his sword to notice. He was gratified to feel it connect, and the stronger vibrations from the ground let Kamura know that his clothesline move had worked, sending Tosen to the floor at his feet. Not one to pass up such an opportunity, Kamura pounced. He immediately had Tosen pinned, his right arm held behind his back. Kamura's massive knees held Tosen's legs down. As Tosen had been wielding Suzumushi in his right hand, the fox-like Taicho took it away, holding it in his left. Instantly, he could see. He smiled, having achieved his goal, but was shocked to see Tosen's left arm having returned. But Hisagi cut it off. Well done, old friend, Tosen murmured. But unfortunately for you, it's over. Resurrection. What? But in his moment of distraction, Suzumushi vibrated wildly in his hand, coming loose and being caught by Tosen's left hand. The Bankai's darkness shrunk nigh instantly, until it concealed only its wielder's body, before violently throwing Kamura away. Shaking his head to clear it from the dizziness of being thrown so suddenly, Kamura looked up with newfound horror at what his best friend had done to himself. He'd become a full hollow, complete with a hollow hole, and gross misshapen form. Kamura had never, not even once, suspected that Tosen could or would go so far. Suzumushi Hayakushi, Griller Grillo. The blind Shinigami hunched over, his four-clawed hands dangling beneath him from insect-like arms as he attempted to adjust to his new body. So this is what it's like to become one with your Zanpakuto for a hollow. Tosen mused. He counted 4 hands, and 2 legs. 6 limbs in total. I suspected as much, given my Zanpakuto's name. Similarly, he discovered he had short fur on his body, and wings as thin as rice paper. Again, that could be explained by the insect properties of Suzumushi. His head changing shape was also not a complete surprise. Insect heads were very different from human heads. His mask covering every part of his head, but his mouth was interesting, but not overly so. He could feel and hear metallic chains as they clinked, covering a set of twisted horns protruding from his back. A remnant of my Bankai perhaps. The one thing that he did not expect, however, was the feeling that his eyes had grown huge and bulbous, and they were poking outside of his head. It was a unique sensation, even if they were closed. But there was something new, was it? Could it be light? The prospect of being able to see for the first time in his life was too much to resist, and his eyes flew open. I can see. He turned and spotted his old friend. You're uglier than I thought you would be, Tosen taunted. Kamura was able to regain his senses, and he glared up at the man-turned-beast. You have truly abandoned all traces of being a Shinigami, haven't you? He accused. Tell me, Kamura, do you remember why I became a Shinigami? What my goal was the whole time? Justice. Indeed. Do you remember why that was my goal? Your friend, from before. The one whose Zanpakuto you wielded, and have now perverted. Yes. Tosen cried out. She wanted to help bring justice. She wanted peace and justice in the world. And she was killed by the Godai 13. Did you not think it strange that I, whose greatest friend was killed by the Shinigami, would willfully join them? You always said you had taken up her will, her desire for the ideal of a truly peaceful world. Kamura answered. The ideal of true justice. But what is justice? Goodness, and justice, they are not the same. To live a peaceful life, spreading justice wherever I can, that sounds like a life of goodness, no? But I cannot tolerate that. Where is the justice for the murder of my friend? Living out a peaceful life in the same organization as they who killed her without taking revenge, that would an act of evil. The two of them stood silently for a few moments. Finally, Kamura raised his head once more and looked his opponent straight in the eyes, a new fire of determination within them. It seems I totally misjudged you, and we will never be able to see eye to eye again. But if our core beliefs are so incompatible, then words are meaningless. His grip around Tenken tightened as he pointed it at Tosen. And if words are meaningless, then there is only one way this can end. Bankai. Kakujo Tengen Myo-o. Hiyori leapt back, breathing hard through her mask as she attempted to reel in her rage. Blood dripped down her right arm from a strike she'd taken to the shoulder, and her left leg buckled slightly under weight. She'd received a slash to her thigh, and was losing blood quickly. But not a single one of her attacks had connected. Not one. Her hands clenched angrily around her Zanpakuto. It's like he's just playing with me. Eizen frowned at her. You've grown somewhat stronger, yes, but I expected more after 100 years. What a waste. What made Hiyori even angrier, was that she knew that Eizen was right. She had had more than a century to grow stronger than she had been as Shinigami under the Godai 13, but Hiyori was not one to train for the sake of training, like Kensei. Nor was she a person with much patience, like Mashiro or Hachigen. She wasn't laid back but serious when the time called for it like Rose and Love, nor was she a woman who strived to better herself like Lisa. She wasn't even calm, collected and incredibly focused like Shinji when he took his personality mask off, and put his hollow mask on. All that Hiyori had on her side was an inexhaustible anger and hatred. She hated the Godei 13 for trying to kill her for something that wasn't her fault. She hated the humans for being so prone to losing hope, succumbing to despair over the smallest of things, because it made them hollow when there wasn't any need for it if they'd just get off their butts and fix their own DMN problems. She hated Aizen for inflicting the hollowification on her, and she hated Shinji at that moment because he'd been right to try to hold her back and keep her from fighting. Most of all, Hiyori hated herself for being weak. If I were more patient, or dedicated, or focused, or even a little more serious, she berated herself angrily. If that's all you have, then run away, Aizen advised coolly. You are not strong enough to fight me. Hiyori's eyes flew wide when her mask crumbled, her time limit having been exceeded, before they narrowed. She looked to her lower right, her expression morphing to that of humiliation and emotional pain. Coming to a decision, tears coming unbidden to her eyes, she rushed over to Shinji, picking him up in a smooth motion that ended with him being held over her shoulder, and then rushed to where she could detect Hachigen. She trusted no one but the wizard to treat a wizard. Aizen raised an eyebrow, he hadn't expected her to actually take him up on his offer. Perhaps she's grown a little, he mused to himself. Taking advantage of not being attacked, he glanced around, observing his surroundings and counting the fights. Baragan is fighting Hachigen, Harabel and, is that little Kuchiki Rukia? How bold. Grimmjow is over there, guarding their quaint little healing structure. Stark is fighting Yukitake Taicho, Kaiaraka Taicho and... Kaname was correct, that is indeed Nellio. Taking note of it, Aizen nodded to himself and continued looking around. Kaname has revealed his Resurrection and is fighting Kamura Taicho and Hiseigai Fukuteicho. Ikamaru is fighting. Oh. Aizen let out interestedly, it seems that Ikakukuen has finally revealed his Bankai. I wonder if Yumachika-kun will reveal his Shirkai's true form. Abarai Fukuteicho, Hiyori, and Shinji are heading to be healed. Histegaya Taicho appears to be there as well, but he's regaining strength quickly. Yamamoto Suteicho is simply waiting. He's preparing for something, I'm sure. Aizen smiled, sensing a new fighter approach. You can come out now. Soifun Taicho. The glare on her face could have melted steel. Sting, Suzumabachi. Her Zanpakuto immediately took on the form of the lethally venomous stinger. Aizen. Soifun Taicho, have you gone insane? He asked curiously. You, who followed the rules to the letter, who embodied the philosophy of the Onamitsukido, you would fight me outright like this. Central 46 were fools to make you a teacher at the academy, Soifun spat. No, Soifun. Don't speak ill of the dead. Aizen's eyes practically glittered with amusement. After all, you were fooled as well, as I recall. I was never fooled by you, Aizen. I was always watching you, I knew there was something not quite right but I could never put my finger on it, just like Anohana Taicho could not figure out what was wrong with your so-called corpse, just that there was. It's a good thing you could never put your finger on it, the traitor said. If it were that middle finger of yours that was laid upon me, I'm sure that stinger of yours would have pierced me. And now it's time for Suzumabachi to take your life. Suddenly, Soifun blurred into 15 copies, 15 Shunpa clones. Impressive, Aizen commented. The assassin smiled thinly. Thank you for the compliment. We don't hear many in Onamitsukido. She, and all her other clones, leapt at Aizen, stinger extended. Aizen moved to block, swinging Kyoka Suijetsu. Getsuga Tenshu. Only to be distracted as he was attacked from behind by a masked Kurosaki Ichigo, who swung at his neck with as much power as he could muster. Taken completely by surprise at the wizard's sudden appearance right behind him, Aizen was visibly thrown off. Soifen's stinger stabbed at Aizen's heart, but the results were completely cloaked by the Getsuga Tensho that covered a quarter of the fake Karakura town in its intensity, all of it focused at a single point. When the overwhelming darkness of Ichigo's attack faded, Soifen could not help but stare in shock, having leapt back after stabbing. The sheer power in that attack had almost suffocated her in its proximity, reminding her painfully of Ichigo's previous declaration. "I swear I will come at you with all my power." But on top of that, Aizen had come out of the conflict completely unscathed. There was no homonka, hell, she hadn't even managed to pierce him. Worse, his head was still attached quite firmly to his shoulders. She watched with disbelieving eyes as a barrier Kido shattered, having successfully blocked Ichigo's attack in its tracks a mere inch from his neck. A moment later, Aizen Shunpa at a slight distance away, leaving Soifen and Ichigo standing side by side. The back of the neck is a blind spot for everyone. Did you really think that I would leave it unprotected when confronting a military organization out for my life? Aizen asked with a slightly smug tone, completely ignoring Soifen. Ichigo tightened his grip on Tensa Zangetsu. "It's not over yet." "Oh no," Aizen agreed, "it's barely begun." "How? How did you block me?" Soifen demanded. Aizen turned his head slightly to the side to address her while keeping both eyes firmly on the wizard before him. When two Shinigami fight, it's a battle of the strength of their Ryatsu. It's like with Kenpachi, Ichigo explained, his dually layered voice sending unpleasant chills down Soifen's spine. Kenpachi naturally emits so much Ryatsu from his skin that it works the same way as an Arrancar's Hierro. You need to strike with more Ryatsu than he's protecting with to do any damage. It's one of the reasons he's always after me for a rematch. I'm one of the few people who can push him to take off his eye patch and still manage. Aizen must be the same way. Your strike must not have had enough Ryatsu to even push through his skin. Exactly, the traitor agreed. So unless you've got another ace up your sleeve, Soifen Taicho, I suggest you give us some space. He smiled. After all, you'd hardly want to get in the way. Soifen's fists clenched. I am not useless, she growled. Are you or aren't you a Shinigami Taicho? Ichigo snarled. If you can't even lay a hand on him in Shirkai, take it to the next level. The Taicho glared at him, though she could hardly keep from cringing at the sight of the masked Ichigo, looking and feeling more hollow-like than she'd have dreamed a Shinigami could be. Ichigo's left eye, a hollow amber within inky black depths, was firmly focused on her, demanding she bring out her ultimate weapon, her ultimate shame. But to destroy an enemy of Soul Society, Soifen could bear any shame. Fine. Keep him busy for a few minutes, my Bankai is a long-distance type and it needs some preparation time, she murmured under her breath. I'll see what I can do. Without a word, Soifen vanished, leaving the two archenemies facing each other. How are you, Kurosaki Ichigo? Aizen asked almost cordially, as if they weren't about to fight for their lives. I imagine it's been a very trying few days for you. Turned into an Arrancar and back to Vizard, chafing under Yamamoto. He's stalling. For what? But Ichigo didn't dare remove his mask, Aizen was too strong to power down for even a minute. Even so, Ichigo needed to stall Aizen for Soifen's Bankai, whatever it was. I'm fine. Managed to get some rest while my inner hollow was in control. Yamamoto can be very frustrating, though. I'm sure you must know what I'm talking about. Oh, I know very well, the treasonous Taicho agreed with what sounded like real sympathies. Making orders you don't really agree with but have to follow because he's liable to try to kill you otherwise? Let me guess, he's ordered you to kill any Arrancar that you've managed to get on your side if they don't immediately go back to Hueco Mundo after I die, assuming you all managed to kill me, he added almost as an afterthought. Ichigo shook his head. He couldn't believe he was actually having a decent conversation with the man. Yeah. I mean, they may be hollows, but they're powerful allies, and most of them are no worse than some of the Shinigami the Gotei 13 employs. It's hard for anyone to top Kenpachi in bloodthirstiness, and they let him become a Taicho. Eizen's smile broadened minutely. Quite true. Then again, I suppose the two of us, as superior beings, are more capable of understanding. Ichigo frowned behind the mask. What do you mean, superior beings? Well, look at yourself for instance. You're no longer just a Shinigami, or just a hollow. You can't even be defined as just a wizard or an Arankar anymore, the master of the Espada commented, gesturing lightly at him. You've evolved as both a Shinigami and as a hollow in such a short span of time. That, I suspect, is due to your human nature. Kurosaki Ichigo, you alone among all the Shinigami, wizard, Arankar and hollow here, remain a living, breathing human being. Your being outside your body is irrelevant. What is relevant, however, is that humans have an incredible capacity for growth and evolution. Just look at the Quincy, for instance. Being attacked and killed by hollows, triggering high levels of spiritual awareness, and then a method of attack. Within a few generations, being strong enough to wage a serious war against the Shinigami, which had been around for centuries. Your other friends are another example. Evolving from having no spiritual awareness at all, to where they are now is truly remarkable. You see, Kurosaki Ichigo, I believe that your being human has allowed you to evolve further, faster than any Shinigami ever could. And that is the reason that transferring Shinigami powers to a human being is as forbidden as gaining hollow powers, Aizen finished. Ichigo had to admit that what Aizen said made a degree of sense. You must admit, though, that a lot of my growth is because I had Urahara and Yoruchi. I wouldn't have Bankai or Shuunpa if not for them. Perhaps, Aizen allowed with a small secretive smile. But perhaps more of it is due directly to my interference. Like what? Aside from my determination not to let you kill any of my friends, I mean. The traitor laughed outright. Surely you don't think that was the extent of my involvement? You are a unique creature, Kurosaki Ichigo. Human, Shinigami, and hollow at once. Allied with the grandson of the man who tried to bridge the Quincy and Shinigami, and two spiritually gifted humans with powers unlike anything the Godai 13 has ever recorded. I could not help but see how far you all could evolve. I was too curious to just destroy the experiment. No, instead I attempted to further your growth by pitting you against foes that would force you to become stronger. Horror blossomed in Ichigo's mind. No, he couldn't. You can't mean. Oh yes, Aizen affirmed. Who do you think sent the Grand Fisher to that same place where your mother was killed to fight you? That fight served its purpose, to force you to acknowledge your need for strength. And do you really think that Abarai Renji and Kuchiki Byakuya would be sent to retrieve their love interest and little sister respectively? No. Yamamoto would usually never be that cruel. I was the one who arranged for them to receive the orders, knowing that you would attack to protect Kuchiki Rukia. And it was then that you found out that there was more to being a Shinigami than simply slaying hollows. You learned about Shirkai. I can see how you would predict that Urahara would come to my rescue, and maybe even foresee his method of restoring my powers, but there's no way you could have predicted where I would end up in Soul Society when I inevitably came to rescue her. How could you possibly have been able to arrange for me to fight Ichigo, Renji, and Kenpachi? Ichigo argued. It could just as easily have been anyone else. True, Aizen agreed. But it didn't matter too much where you landed. I knew that Urahara would have trained you to the point of being able to defeat most Fukatecho. By the time you arrived you would be facing cannon fodder until you fought a Fukatecho or someone else comparably strong, because the Taicho would naturally be given orders not to engage unless necessary. Their powers are too strong, they'd damage the Siriidii. Kenpachi would be the only one who would willfully disregard those orders. It was only natural you'd fight him eventually. But how would you have known that I'd win against him? It was a very near thing, and I only won because my Zanpakuto lent me his power and restored himself at the last second. Even if you didn't win, I knew that Yoruchi would be among your team. After all, Urahara Kisuke would never let someone as fresh and naive as you were go without an escort. Otherwise it was just asking for someone to kill you all. Also, by that time you'd encountered a friendly member of the 4th Division, who was traveling with you. Win or lose against Kenpachi, I knew you would be healed and that much stronger for it. And if you did somehow die, then it meant the end of the experiment of how far you could evolve. Ichigo was grasping for straws now. But you couldn't have predicted how my Bankai would turn out. If you arranged for me to fight Byakuya again at Tsukyuku Hill, then a Bankai can be countered by most any other Bankai. Jin's Bankai, as you have encountered, could be blocked by yours through comparison of speed. Alternatively, Hitsugaya-kun's Bankai could have countered Jin's by freezing the metal, rendering it far more brittle and incapable of the piercing power. Or Jin could have countered Hitsugaya-kun's Bankai by punching through his ice wings and killing him in one hit. No matter what Bankai you had an opportunity to counter Kachiki Byakuya. Given your abnormally high Ryatsu, and your inner hollow, I found it increasingly unlikely that you would die. Eizen's smile grew. Especially since you had someone to protect, and the resolve to ensure that no one died because you weren't strong enough like that day your mother died. Ichigo felt like he'd been punched in the gut. What, do you know about my mother? He finished with a snarl, hackles raised and bloodlust rising at the forbidden topic. How do you know so much about me? Aizen shook his head. I've known about you since the day you were born. The unique circumstances of your birth prompted me to watch you. And when you started to grow weak, I acted. The shock caused Ichigo to lose his grip on hollowification, and his mask shattered. Ichigo's heartbeat was slowly overwhelming his own hearing even as he felt his body grow more and more numb. As if from far away, he heard himself ask incredulously. You've known about me since I was born. A memory flashed, and Ichigo's heartbeat ceased. He couldn't breathe, he was drowning. Suddenly he was back on that fateful day. Back on the day that everything changed. Back on the day that he changed. Back on the day that set him firmly on the path that defined not what, but who he was. The rain of memory engulfed him. Zangetsu and Cazador. De la Luna both looked up in Ichigo's inner world as the sky darkened with thunderclouds before promptly letting loose a drenching, freezing rain. Well, sheet. Oi, Zangetsu, what's going on? The spirit form of the mighty Zanpakuto bowed his head. An old wound that has never been healed, that I fear never may truly mend, has been reopened. Watch carefully, Cazador de la Luna, and witness your true origins. The unending rain provided a curtain upon the many sideways skyscrapers that littered the mindscape. With it raining so hard he could hardly see a dozen feet in front of him, coupled with cacophony of raindrops hitting the buildings around him, the Arrancar couldn't see how he would be able to witness anything before a surprisingly clear shout startled him. Hey! What the? Cazador spun around in shock, hand already on his blade's hilt before he got a grip. The rain lightened just enough for him to see a solitary skyscraper a scant 20 feet away. Taking advantage of being able to see, Cazador saw a kid in a yellow raincoat on one of the skyscrapers, rushing towards a girl on the edge who appeared ready to jump. I wonder who that is. Peering closely, Cazador watched as the constant rain seemed to paint a picture, an illusion of a river just beyond the girl, and wet grass and mud underneath the boots of the child who was running towards her. It was only after the inner hollow had seen a flash of the orange hair that he realized it was Ichigo who was running. Keh, of course. He wanted to save the girl. Then Cazador saw a tall, beautiful woman under an umbrella rushing after Ichigo, and heard her vaguely calling out. Mom, he breathed. It was his first time he'd had a chance to really see her alive. While Cazador shared many of Ichigo's memories, they were mostly after he'd awakened for the first time as Ichigo regained his Shinigami powers. Just then, lightning struck, and in the brief flash of light, Cazador saw that the girl had been replaced by a strangely familiar hollow. When the flash faded, he saw that Ichigo was just waking up, apparently having been knocked unconscious. Atop the young boy was the bloodied corpse of his mother. Ichigo's feelings of shock and the swift rise of horror and denial were so strong that even merely watching, Cazador suddenly found it hard to breathe as he relived his partner's memory. It was then that Cazador recognized the next feeling. It was the emotional sensation of having one's heart ripped out forcefully, the psychic torment of unbearable guilt. The utter bleakness of despair from which a soul transforms into a hollow. Realizations ripped through the Arankar faster than he thought he could process them. Before he could put voice to them, however, Zangetsu beat him to the punch, his voice low but still clearly audible from beside Cazador de la Luna. Yes, that moment is where you were born. The manifestation of Ichigo's Zanpakuto shook his head. That tragedy planted the seeds of hollow power within him, and is also the cause of Ichigo's history of fighting. He refused to be weak enough to let the same thing happen to the rest of his family, but even so guilt plagued him for many years, thinking that somehow he had killed his mother, until he came face to face with the hollow that killed her. And? Cazador asked eagerly. Despite our best efforts, the hollow known as Grand Fissure escaped. Something in Zangetsu's tone made Cazador bite back the immediate disparaging remark about Ichigo's fighting skills. There's something you're not telling me. Zangetsu turned to face his hollow wielder and looked him dead in the eye. The Grand Fissure is known for having killed and evaded several skilled Shinigami for over 50 years. Ichigo, with almost no experience, no control over his Ryatsu, and very minimal skills with the blade, nearly slew him out of sheer might, determination, and lust for vengeance. The implications were not lost on Cazador. Wait, if he was able to do that before gaining Shirkai, what will he be like with Bankai? And with me? Zangetsu was silent now, looking up at the dark clouds as he waited to be used. He noted with ill-concealed worry about the still-growing cumulonimbus that was forming from Ichigo's stormy state of mind. Lightning flashed within the storm cloud again before shooting out across the heavens, illuminating a disturbingly human expression of worry on Cazador de la Luna. While Zangetsu could still contact his wielder, what could he possibly say? Ichigo's mother died because of Eizen, and now the traitor stood before Ichigo, challenging his power. If the Vizard had ever needed motivation to kill with prejudice instead of simply defeat, that was it. All Zangetsu could do was offer his support in slaying Ichigo's enemies, and hope the reign would end soon. Meanwhile, outside of his inner world, the Shinigami substitute breathed very shallowly, his eyes wide in renewed emotional pain as he pulled himself away from the unforgettable memory that defined his life from such a young age. You set the Grand Fissure on my mother that day. The pain in his heart slowly changed into something more useful. Because I was soft, and weak, and completely reliant on her. It was something more than anger, and Ichigo could feel it rising within him. You knew that killing her would force me to harden and grow stronger. It was something more than fury, and Ichigo could feel it beginning to twist his perception and warp his mentality. You knew it would give me resolve to never let it happen again. Ichigo now knew the word for what he felt. Madness. Aizen watched in fascination as black flames crept swiftly across Ichigo's eyes, from left to right, replacing the whites of his eyes with an inky blackness, and the brown became a hollow amber. He noted with satisfaction that Ichigo's Ryatsu was flaring out quite magnificently. Indeed, and you have grown quite strong, Kurosaki Ichigo. I find myself interested in seeing your next step in evolution. It started low. A small chuckle, barely audible as Ichigo's body shook, before it grew louder and stronger, until he raised his head again, tears streaming down his face from his hollow eyes as he laughed, his sanity slipping away. His Ajucha's mask slowly materialized and fastened itself to his face as Ichigo continued to laugh and cry simultaneously. The laughter ended abruptly, though, as soon the mask finished appearing. Strength. Ichigo breathed harshly. You killed my mother, to make me strong. To make me evolve. Without any warning, he was suddenly in front of Aizen. Black Tensa Zangetsu smothered in the dark power of Getsuga Tensho as Ichigo swung with all his might. Aizen blocked with some effort. Is this all you have? Pity, I would have thought knowing the truth behind your mother's demise to be a much more powerful motivator. Ichigo fixed a piercing gaze upon his foe. Motivation? You planted the seeds of power in me, now reap what you have sowed. A white Tensa Zangetsu materialized in his hand, thrumming with power and bloodlust as a Getsuga Tensho ran down this sword as well. Eizen's eyes widened. What? A second Zanpakuto? In Bankai no less. For perhaps the first time in a long while, the perpetually calm trader felt the stirrings of fear creeping up his spine. He leapt back using the speed he'd worked so hard to acquire, narrowly avoiding the swipe of the white weapon. Impressive, Ichigo-kun. Only instinct allowed Aizen to whirl around and block another strike from the hollowified Ichigo. It's sad, Aizen, is that you can't tell the difference between me and a speed clone when I copied the move from your own subordinate, the wizard cackled before using Shunpa again to vanish. He began circling around his enemy at his highest speed, creating several images of himself as he blurred in and out of sight between them, attacking from every angle, every opening he could find. Aizen blocked or evaded every single strike, though it was admittedly quite difficult when he had to block more than one sword coming at him. He was highly impressed at how much of a challenge the boy had become, but there was a reason he felt he was capable to go against Soul Society. He had pushed his skills in every aspect of Shinigami warfare as high as he could. However, when Ichigo suddenly stopped, he was confused. Why didn't you continue your attack? He asked calmly. To everyone's surprise, Ichigo threw his head back and laughed. With the powerful Ajucha's mask on his face changing his voice, it came out as a horrible, soul-chilling laugh, and his unseen allies in the area all shivered violently. After a few seconds, he looked Aizen straight in the eyes. You're so strong, Aizen. Look at us. I'm at my strongest form yet you are keeping up with me. You haven't even used your Shurikai's effect on me. Are you scared, then? This only made Ichigo laugh again. Are you kidding? Why on earth would I be scared? I just couldn't help laughing at how hopeless it all seems right now. But I got something that you don't. Aizen was intrigued at the last comment. What's that? The will to do whatever it takes to kill you, even if it means sacrificing everything. Ichigo launched himself at Aizen once more, Black Tensa Zangetsu held in a position for a sweeping strike across his body. My body, my mind, my very soul I will condemn to oblivion as long as you just Fenji die. However, Aizen was not the master of Kyoka Suigetsu, the most powerful illusionary Zanpakuto in existence, for nothing. His skill in observing even the tiniest of details was unmatched. Even as he blocked Ichigo's strike, he leapt upwards, narrowly evading the bleached white Tensa Zangetsu coming at him from the side. Undeterred, Ichigo proceeded to change the arc of the swing by pulling sharply up on the chain and sending a burst of Ryatsu down it, forcing Aizen to bring his sword down to block the sudden Getsuga-covered Zanpakuto. The leader of the Arrancar was unable to completely block the next strike, though, as Ichigo Shunpaed right behind him with the godlike speed of a hollowified double Bankai. Getsuga. Aizen's eyes widened, but he didn't have time to say anything else as Ichigo brought his blade, wrought in so much power that it appeared more moonfang than sword, down upon him. Tenshu. Chapter 21, Necessary Evil. Rukia was on the verge of panicking right now. Then again, who wouldn't be if that person was being chased by an insane skeletal hollow who only had to breathe on you from a distance to rot away your flesh and bone? If it weren't for Hachi putting up barriers left and right, Rukia knew she'd surely be dead by now. Please, hold him still. My attacks are dances for a reason, it takes a moment to set them up. Get him trapped, if only for a moment. Rukia called out desperately, a plan formulating in her head. The large wizard clapped his hands together, murmuring under his breath as he materialized 4 barriers, which quickly closed into a box around Barragan, who simply filled the box with his respira, breaking it down rapidly. You've only got seconds before it breaks. Buying time for an attack. Humph. Against me, buying time is like spitting in the face of Kami. Useless, and ultimately makes things worse for you. Harabel. Use your Cascada. Even as the Arrancar responded, Rukia Shunpaed over to the opposite side of Barragan from the water using Ex Espada. Tsugi no Mai. Hakuren. The barriers broke a mere instant before the pair of ice and water attacks could connect, but in that instant Baragon vanished into Sonido, evading the attack and going after Hachigen, who promptly put up enormous, nigh unbreakable barriers. Do you really think you can stop me, the Lord of Hueco Mundo? Suddenly a trio of ice dragons erupted out of seemingly nowhere and forced Baragon to slice them down with his axe. You're not in Hueco Mundo anymore, a familiar voice stated calmly. Rukia spun around and DMN near passed out in relief. Hitsugaya Taicho had returned, fully healed, in Bankai, standing on the roof of a nearby building. But then she saw someone else next to him. Oriheim. Why are you here? She Shunpaed down, ready to carry her friend away from the mortal danger. Let's get out of here. No. Here is where I'm needed, Inoue replied quietly. You'll get killed. Rukia argued, eyes wide and pleading. Do you know the true nature of my powers? The Shinigami was thrown off by Inoue's tone. Her usual kindly voice, reflective of her gentle spirit, had just the hint of steel in her words. Even so, she responded. Not really. I know you're a healer though. Of all things, she didn't expect Inoue to shake her head, negating the assertion. No, that's just what I use them for most of the time. Like Kido can be used for healing, binding or destruction, my powers have different uses. Now please, Rukia-chan, I need to concentrate. Hitsugaya-kun has explained what Baragon can do, and I need to focus to counter him. Rukia could only step back and stare at her friend. How did she grow so much? She's so confident she can finish him, but she only got her powers a year ago. She shook her head. Rukia had to admit she didn't know the details of Inoue's powers. It was entirely possible that she had somehow been blessed with a power capable of countering Baragon's hellish mastery of time dilation and his lethal Respira. She stepped back a little further, Sodi no Shirayuki at the ready, just in case. You've returned. I admit I thought you had run, but I see you lack even the most basic of wisdom and primal instinct of self-preservation, Baragon taunted in an observatory tone. Do you think you can trap me again? Oh, I'm sure I could, Hitsugaya told him coolly. However, not only would it kill some of the people in the area, but it would not rid our world of you forever. It might be days, it might be years, but you'd return thanks to your time dilation powers. By inverting it, years could pass for the world around you, but only minutes or hours for you. Baragon laughed. Oh, so the ant shows some intelligence. So, now that you see the inevitability of death, just what is your plan for defeating me? I won't be the one to defeat you. She will. Hitsugaya indicated Inoue on the building, who was staring up at Baragon with eyes devoid of fear. There was a pause. A human. A human. You dare to think a human, a flea to the smallest of Shinigami ants, could harm me, let alone defeat me? I know she can, Hitsugaya said with a small smile. Go ahead, try to kill her. I won't stop you. Hachigen looked at him incredulously. Are you insane? She's only human. She may be human, but she's far stronger than you think, came the response. Let her show you what she can do. Trust me. Baragon laughed. Oh, now you've caught my interest. Very well, your death has been delayed. Let's see what this so mighty human can do against my Respira. He turned to face Inoue and let loose his rotting breath, waiting with interest to see how the weak human would react. Will she flee before my might? Put up some useless shield. Just stand and die. Oriheim. Rukia screamed, taking her arm and about to shunpa, only to have Inoue roughly pull her arm away. Rukia-chan. Watch me. I am no longer as weak as I was. Inoue focused hard, glaring determinedly at the deadly visage of Baragon's Resurrection as the Respira rushed towards her. She took a deep breath and steadied her resolve, focusing on her power. This would be the biggest feat she'd yet attempted with it, but she knew in her heart she could do it. She had to. Santen Keshin, she called out, throwing her arms in front of her as if to brace herself, and her shield. I reject. An enormous triangular barrier materialized in front of her, spanning several blocks and reaching high into the sky. The Respira rushed it, impacted, but impossible. Berrigan roared as even after several seconds, the shield showed no signs of growing weaker. Why won't your shield rot? All things made by mortals are susceptible to time. Even Kido falls before me. This is my power, Inoue announced to the awed eyes of her audience. You may be able to rot away flesh, bone and sinew. You may be able to decompose earth and metal and even dissipate Ryatsu. But my technique is based on none of those, nothing but the eternal force of my will to protect. This is my power, Berrigan, Lord of Hueco Mundo. This power that intrudes on Kami's territory. The power to reject and reshape reality. And I reject you and your power. Tsubaki. Koten Zanshuan. I reject. The fairy practically erupted from her hairpin, resting momentarily in front of her hands as he generated a thin rejection barrier above and below him, forming an edge as sharp as Inoue's resolve. It launched at her opponent almost too fast for her eyes, accustomed to watching Ichigo's Bankai, to follow. Tsubaki slipped right through her Santen Keshin as though it weren't there, and continued to punch through the Respira without any signs of slowing or weakening. Berrigan quickly drew his axe and brought it down on the fairy, but suddenly, the Koten Zanshuan had changed directions and was attacking from behind. To the Time Lord's disgruntlement, the attack seemed completely unaffected by his time dilation. Instead of paying attention to the pest attacking him, he sonidoed directly to the barrier and slammed his axe against it. It cracked, giving him heart as he attacked it again and again, making the cracks longer and wider. Inoue began to falter, keeping up her shield, and the attack was exhausting her quickly. The extreme mental focus it required was beginning to give her a headache, and her Ryatsu was draining at an alarming rate. But then she started feeling better, and saw that Rukia was using a healing Kido on her. But I'm not injured, she asked confusedly. Healing Kido works by restoring the patient's Ryatsu first, so the healing of the body can be aided more quickly, Rukia explained. I'm restoring your Ryatsu, now finish him while I keep you going. Right. Inoue nodded firmly, turning her full attention back to Berrigan. With some focus, the shield's cracks repaired themselves, becoming as good as new as Tsubaki continued to terrorize the Segunda Espada. Berrigan was understandably outraged that he couldn't seem to harm a measly human. How can a human wield such a terrifying power, he screamed. No one can defy a kami. Maybe, but you are no kami. Soten Kishun. Rukia immediately recognized it as Inoue's healing technique, and wondered just what she was up to, but was too occupied with keeping Inoue's Ryatsu levels up to ask. In response, Berrigan let loose another Respira, except to suddenly find himself, and all his Respira, surrounded in a golden barrier. Seeing him trapped, Inoue called back her Koten Zanshuan and Santen Kishun, knowing she'd need all her Ryatsu and focus now to do what needed to be done. She had refused to show it, but the enemy had even more terrifying Ryatsu than Ichigo's mask. Hachigen took the opportunity to throw several barriers around the Soten Kishun as a precautionary measure in case Inoue's tactic, whatever it was, failed. Then he joined Rukia in the healing Kido, feeling that the younger Shinigami was almost completely drained. Haribel and Hitsugaya leaped down to join them, with Inoue at the front. She looked up at Berrigan with kind eyes. It's very sad what I'm going to have to do to you now, you know. I've never done it to anyone, and it seems far too cruel a punishment for almost anyone save Aizen himself. But, in order to protect my friends, I've learned that sometimes I have to make sacrifices. She closed her eyes. Even if those sacrifices haunt me for the rest of my life. Soten Kishun. I reject. Suddenly knowing what was going to happen to him, fear gripped Berrigan for the first time in longer than he could remember. He poured all his power into his Respira and slammed his battle axe into the Soten Kishun over and over again, trying his best to break it to no avail. He even gathered and fired his most powerful Zero. But Baragon could feel his Ryatsu fading away faster than he was spending it. No. You can't do this to me. Inoue said nothing, but kept her eyes and focus on the weakening espada. I'm a kami. The kami of Hueco Mundo. You can't just erase me. But the truth was staring him in the face even now. Before his very eyes, the tip of his battle axe had just evaporated, as though it had turned to ash and been whisked away by the wind. I won't be defeated by a human. An ant. A mere insect to my might. Did you know, Baragon? Inoue whispered. Even insects like me can bring down the mightiest of monsters. The axe was now almost completely gone. Baragon had only one last card to play in his pursuit to survive. You do realize that erasing me will erase all the souls that I've eaten, right human? How does it feel to be completely destroying the thousands, perhaps millions of souls that make up my power? They'll be fine. I'm not rejecting them, I'm rejecting you. I'm rejecting the soul that holds them all captive, the being that wouldn't think twice about killing me or my friends. As soon as you're gone, my will directs that they'll go to Soul Society and rejoin the cycle of rebirth. That was it. There was nothing left that he could do. He tried everything. Baragon had to admit that he was done. He would not live past the next few minutes. So he nodded his head regally. It seems I've been bested. It hurts my pride to admit that a human, one lowly human could defeat me, but I was never facing a human at all, was I? He turned his eyeless sockets at Inoue, seeming as though he could stare into her soul as his extremities began fading. Regardless of your form, I was facing a kami, someone whose powers transcend that of Shinigami and Hollow, or even that of Vizard and Arrancar. From one kami to another, beware the machinations and betrayals of mortals. His limbs were completely gone, and his torso was going the same way. They will try to enslave you to use your powers, or kill you for the threat you pose. Now only his head was left, and it was evaporating quickly. Guard yourself well, young kami. And with that, he was gone. Inoue took a deep breath and released her Soten Kishun, returning her fairies to her hairpins. She turned around, facing her friends with a troubled, preoccupied look on her face. Well, that's done. You all should go help with Eizen. I'll stay with you, my powers are a bit superfluous when compared against Hitsugaya Taicho's, Rukia volunteered. The others nodded their assent, though each of them gave a respectful nod to Inoue as well. As soon as they were gone, she turned to Rukia. Could you please bring us down to the ground? With all the fights going on, I'd rather not be on something that could collapse any minute. Rukia smiled, bringing them down easily. Sitting on a nearby bench that had miraculously never been touched by the respira that Baragon had been throwing out so frequently, silence reigned for a minute. Rukia, who was used to Inoue happily jabbering about anything that crossed her mind, grew increasingly worried, and she glanced at Inoue's downcast expression. What's eating you? Inoue quickly glanced around, as though checking if she were actually being eaten by something. When she realized what Rukia meant, she smiled sadly though her eyes were slowly watering. Do you know what I just did? You defeated and killed someone that even the combined forces of Shinigami and Arrancar couldn't, the short Shinigami replied as though it should have been obvious. I didn't kill him. Now real tears were slowly trailing down Inoue's cheeks. Killing him would be bad enough. I'm a pacifist, Rukia-chan. I hate fighting. I hate it when people get hurt. I never wanted to kill anyone in this war, except for that one time when Yami nearly killed Sato-kun. When people die, then they go on to the next step of reincarnation, right? Humans and hollows get purified and move on to Soul Society, people in Soul Society die and get reborn in the living world, right? When Rukia nodded an affirmative, Inoue burst into sobs against Rukia's shoulder. I was so happy when I found that out. Because I knew I'd see my brother again someday. Do you know what it's like for a human to know, absolutely know with proof that there's an afterlife? That there's never truly an end, just another beginning? It's such a relief, and it brings hope to those who've lost someone that maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to find each other again. Rukia nodded as she held her friend. She could understand that, though she'd been very young when she died, so she wouldn't know from experience. She decided not to remind Inoue of the fact that souls could meet a permanent end if they were killed by a Quincy arrow. Inoue's problem came first. But that soul probably didn't do anything to deserve becoming a hollow. That soul didn't do anything to deserve being twisted into a mockery of its old self with a hunger for other souls. That soul beneath the hollow didn't do anything to deserve being erased completely from existence. That soul will never get to see its loved ones, will never be reincarnated, will never again feel all the joys and agonies of life. Because of me. What gave me the right to play kami with people's very souls? Now Rukia knew what Inoue was going through, and now that she understood, she was a little horrified too. She'd watched Baragon fade from reality piece by piece, his last words being a warning of all things to the woman who'd destroyed him. Inoue needed someone who could understand. Rukia revoked her previous decision not to speak about the Quincy. Orihime, you're not the first to have done this, you know. Huh? There's someone else who's had these powers? Not exactly, but there's someone else you know quite well whose powers also destroy hollows without giving them a chance at reincarnation. Ishida Yuryu. What? Inoue gasped. He's one of the last Quincy. There's a reason there aren't many left, Orihime. There was a war, a terrible war between the Quincy and the Shinigami, because the Quincy, when they slay a hollow with their arrows, the souls that made up that hollow cease to exist. Sheet. Ichigo lunged to the side, narrowly escaping being skewered. He had quickly learned the devastating power of Jin's Bankai by receiving a cut to his arm before deflecting it with one of his own weapons, and for the first time Ichigo wished his own Bankai had better defensive properties. He didn't want to die to this BSTRD. He swung down with his right arm, attempting to break Kamishini no Yari with the oversized monk's spade, only to be frustrated as his target retracted long before he could connect. This isn't good. I'm being outmaneuvered, he muttered. I'm just not fast enough. He didn't have to glance at the center blade floating behind him to know that the faded red dragon crest was filling more slowly than usual due to the lack of injuries on either party. Ryuman Hozukamara was highly unusual for a Bankai. Aside from the standard increase in power, it didn't provide any special abilities or defensive properties. Also, it wasn't at full power immediately after releasing, unlike for instance Ichigo and Tensa Zangetsu. No, Ryuman Hozukamara's power was reflected by the red dragon crest on the center axe blade. The more blood was shed on either side, the more the Bankai would wake up and grow more powerful. As a result, Ichigo had a catch-22 on his hands. He couldn't hit Jin to increase his Bankai's power, and he couldn't hit Jin until he had increased his Bankai's power. He couldn't afford to let himself get stabbed and cut in half by the apparently infinitely extending Kamishini no Yari, so letting himself get hurt was not an option. He couldn't get a moment to himself to spin the entire Bankai by the center handle, which was the only other way he knew of to quickly increase the power. And maintaining his Bankai was draining his Ryatsu quickly, too quickly to last for the several minutes it would take for his Bankai to gain a significant amount more power. When he lost Bankai, I'll die, that's for DM sure. Normally, Ichigo had no problems with fighting to the death as long as he could keep his pride. His number one rule was to always fight one-on-one. Rule number 2 was to serve under Kenpachi until his death. Anything that compromised one of those conditions was unacceptable, and as a result Ichigo had hidden his Bankai so he wouldn't get promoted out of Kenpachi's division. However, Ichigo had released his Bankai in public because he'd recognized that the alternative, not unleashing it and possibly resulting in Eizen's success, was by far a worse conclusion. Under the same reasoning, shouldn't he swallow his pride for this one fight and see if Yumachika would help? The man was broken from his musings when Jin extended Kamishini no Yari and attempted to take Ichigo's legs off with a horizontal swipe. Jumping over the blade, Ichigo rushed at his opponent, only to be surprised when the man had instantly shortened Kamishini no Yari to the length of a short sword, re-aimed at Ikiku's torso, and fired. Ikiku twisted, receiving a gash to his chest instead of being killed, but kept running at Jin, hoping that an up-close attack would keep the traitor from being able to use his Bankai effectively. "You're too slow, Ikiku-kun," Jin told him with a smile, merely Shunpying a distance away and getting into position to spear him through once again. The 11th Division member grimaced. "I hate having to resort to this." He vanished in the telltale flicker of Shunpa, much to Jin's surprise, and reappeared right behind him, oversized blade already in mid-swing. Jin's surprise at seeing Ikiku able and willing to use Shunpa, a practice that most of the 11th Division considered too close to Kido to use, worked in concert with his previous injuries from Ichigo and kept him from being able to block effectively. Even so, he managed to leap out of the way enough to keep from losing his arm, only gaining another deep gash in his side. Cursing under his breath, Jin evaded the follow-up swing, twisting as he did so just enough to be able to block the next attack. To his horror, Kamishini no Yari cracked a little more under the pure offensive nature of Ikiku's Bankai. Ikiku grinned, he'd landed a hit, and the Crimson Dragon mark on his Bankai had filled significantly higher due to the severity of the wound. He pressed his advantage, striking again and again, keeping Jin on the defensive, never able to properly point his Kamishini no Yari at him. Ikiku's grin faltered slightly, however, he didn't have much Ryatsu left. "I need to finish this fast." "You're better than I thought," Jin admitted, resorting to several successive Shunpa in order to get some distance between them. It worked, as Ikiku's distaste for the technique had kept him from practicing it enough to keep up with the ex-Daicho. "But you're getting slower, and your movement's predictable. Your Bankai focuses on pure attack power, and it seems that it gets stronger the more that crest of yours fills. Too bad you won't be able to maintain it much longer." "You're right," Ikiku agreed, breathing heavily. "I've only got enough Ryatsu left for one more assault, one more with full power." He rushed at Jin and slashed with all his power. Jin stood still until the very last moment, but then Shunpaed out of the way, a distance behind Ikiku now. "Tsk. Ikiku-kun, you know I'm not part of the 11th Division, so I'm not obligated to fight your way, and my part in this story isn't over yet. Do me a favor though, and don't die. I'm interested in seeing how you turn out." He vanished once more into high speed, escaping and presumably making his way over to Aizen. The exhausted member of the 11th Division cried out, even as his Bankai deteriorated and returned to Shirkai state. Yumachika was suddenly there as Ikiku collapsed, holding him up. "I'm too weak." "Well, now that you've revealed your Bankai, after this is all over you can ask Kenpachi to help you train with it," Yumachika reasoned. "Yeah." Ikiku looked down at Hosokumaru in his hands. "Yeah, maybe I will." The sky of Karakura was engulfed in black and red Ryatsu in the shape of an enormous crescent, its power focused on the point of contact between Aizen and Ichigo. Watching carefully from a distance, waiting for his chance to finish things, Yamamoto was astounded at the raw power of that single strike. Moonfang Piercer of Heaven indeed. Is this it? He did not dare to hope. Ichigo's Ajucha's mask kept all expression hidden as Aizen was revealed, horribly injured. Aizen's clothes had almost completely been burned away, only covered from his waist down in tattered remnants. His back had been cut so deeply and widely that Aizen's spine was exposed, though it hadn't been cut. But before Ichigo's very eyes, the wound was healing. High-speed regeneration, he observed. Behind the mask, he broke out into an insane grin reminiscent of Cazador's. "Let's test its limits then." But before he could once again strike Aizen down, the traitor Shunpaed away, facing the wizard. "No. Do you honestly think that I would make myself a hollow?" He indicated his stomach, where Ichigo could now see a jewel of some sort, which pulsed softly. "The Hogyoku?" "Yes. I am the Hogyoku's master, and by implanting it within me, it protects its host with its own brand of regeneration, among other things," Aizen explained with a knowing smirk. "Whatever. Hollow or Hogyoku, you got the regeneration." I wonder how much pain I can put you through before I kill you. With that, Ichigo was once again dashing at Aizen, who prepared for another brutal assault. However, Ichigo flickered into an ungodly fast Shunpa, pushing himself harder as he attempted to use a move he'd only seen once, and that one time was used against him. He appeared behind Aizen and attempted to stab backwards to pierce the traitor's soul sleep to rob him of all spiritual energy, permanently. However, Tensa Zangetsu hit a barrier, and Ichigo had to use Shunpa again to evade Aizen's counter-swipe. Another barrier? One would think that you'd expect it to be caught off guard. I do try to account for every possibility, and one of them was that Kuchiki Byakuya would be here. Senka is one of his favorite techniques, and the soul sleep is a very critical point. A barrier seemed prudent, Aizen explained with a small smile. Ichigo cackled insanely as he swung his white Tensa Zangetsu against Kyoka Suigetsu, and he brought his masked face mere inches from Aizen's nose as he pressed all his weight against his blade. Unbeknownst to the entirely too calm trader, Ichigo channeled more of his Ryatsu to his black Tensa Zangetsu, and with a motion hidden by his body, swung his obsidian Zanpakuto around the both of them with a chain, tying them both together, sword against sword but otherwise completely pressed against each other. Abruptly, the ivory Bankai flared up with another Getsuga at the ready, pushing even harder against Kyoka Suigetsu. Aizen's eyes widened. It didn't take a genius to know what was going to happen next. He could swear that Ichigo's mask, only inches from his own face, had impossibly widened its grin. Worse, he had no way to evade. The only thing he could do was put his faith in the Hogyoku's regenerative abilities, and perform a self-damaging technique as well. Getsuga. Tensho. Heido 90, Kurohitsuji. Given how Ichigo had not been able to swing, the Getsuga had a different effect than usual. Instead of manifesting as an enormous black, raging crescent attack, it appeared as a bubble-like technique, encompassing them both and growing ever larger. Abruptly, in the middle of the bubble, a large box appeared and black Ryatsu swords promptly pushed their way inside. When the techniques faded, both of them were very badly hurt and several meters apart. Ichigo's left arm hung uselessly from his shoulder, blood running down it, while Aizen himself had suffered more normally crippling gashes to his chest and waist. Both also had several minor wounds all across their bodies, and the top part of Ichigo's Bankai coat had been largely obliterated, leaving him in tattered leggings and scraps on his right shoulder. Aizen's outfit had also been destroyed further. He barely had enough to cover his modesty. But to both fighters' frustration, their opponents were regenerating quickly. The Hogyoku was taking care of Aizen, while Ichigo pumped more and more hollow power throughout his body, focusing mostly on his shoulder. He couldn't afford any crippling wounds. Now! Yamamoto roared from the sidelines. This was the Godai 13's chance to rid Soul Society of both threats at once. Bankai. Jikuho Reikaben. Soifun screamed, having completed her preparations. Her body was tethered to the building she stood upon using what appeared to be a heavy steel sash. Her Zanpakuto turned into what seemed to be an enormous missile launcher melded to her right arm, twice as tall as she herself was, with half a face guard for the right side of her face. The face guard also had slits which were to be used as crosshairs to aim properly, which she promptly used, hauling the massive weapon up and taking but a moment to aim. And then she fired. Aizen and Ichigo froze, each having been about to continue their fight despite not being completely healed. They looked in Soifun's direction in unison, and saw an enormous missile heading straight for them. Understanding blossomed in Aizen's eyes. The enormous power of a Taicho's Bankai condensed into a single explosive attack. No wonder I've never seen her Bankai before. He couldn't afford to be hit by that, even the Hogyoku might not be able to regenerate him from that. Ichigo was not in such an analytical mood at the moment, but even in his maddened state he knew that he did not want to get hit with that. But behind the mask, he grinned. Oh, Adiatith Theosin. He sung mockingly before Shunpainji right behind him. Bakudo 1, Sai. To even Ichigo's surprise, the technique worked perfectly. For only a moment, Aizen was distracted, caught by complete surprise that Ichigo could use Kido at all. With the Vizard's massive Ryatsu, awful control, and hollowified state, Aizen would have bet almost anything that even the smallest Kido would blow up in his face. On top of that, Ichigo had been a Shinigami for so little time, it was almost inconceivable that he would bother learning the tricky arts of Heido and Bakudo when his Bankai was a pure melee type. It made no sense. Why would Ichigo learn anything about Kido when in the time it would take for him to be able to use the weakest of them, he could have grown even stronger and faster physically and played to his strengths. All in all, Aizen had never anticipated that Ichigo could and would use Kido at all. But even with Aizen's distraction, it took only another moment for him to shrug off the Bakudo. While it was empowered by Ichigo's masked Bankai state, it was still only the very lowest level of Bakudo. Luckily for Ichigo, that single moment was enough. He promptly slashed at the air with some hollow Ryatsu and opened a Garganta, jumping in and closing it to evade the missile's detonation within the emptiness of the void between worlds. Aizen witnessed Ichigo's escape and cursed, the missile was almost upon him, and that Bakudo, weak though it was, had robbed him of almost all the time he had to get away. He began to Shuinpa as fast as he could away from the missile, which tracked him as he went. Bakudo 81, Danku. A translucent white energy barrier materialized behind him as he fled from the missile, even as the Hogyoku continued to heal his wounds. As Aizen had hoped, the missile exploded upon impact. As he had bitterly expected, the explosion was enormous, even more widespread than Kurosaki Ichigo's latest Getsuga Tensho, and almost as powerful, though it was not condensed into a single point. Aizen threw up barrier after barrier as he attempted to outrun the explosion, and one after another, each barrier was destroyed with next to no effect on the intensity due to not being completely formed yet. And then Aizen was caught in the explosion, and searing heat nearly flash-fried his arms as the concussive blast propelled him at speeds he'd never before achieved. Into and through a dozen or so buildings as he tried desperately to slow using a variation of the airwalk technique to create drag. Aizen finally managed to slow down enough to flip himself back up into an upright position, standing near the edges of Karakura as he assessed the damage. His hands and arms looked as if they'd been caught in Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka, with second and third degree burns running up and down his arms and his hands almost blackened. Even now, though, the dead, burnt skin was flaking off and being replaced by fresh skin generated by the Hogyoku. Aizen's torso was better, suffering only mild burns, a broken rib, and several scratches thanks to the several barriers he'd cast prior to battle, though they had all been destroyed. His body was far stronger than those paltry buildings, but steel supports could be extremely sharp from mortal objects, which explained his scratches. Aizen pursed his lips, the Gotei 13 was stronger than he'd anticipated, and Soifen's Bankai was unexpectedly powerful, though it was clearly evident that she hadn't practiced it, seeing as there was no second missile coming at him now. Unless I'm out of range, he mused. Well, I need to heal up a bit before I engage Yamamoto or Ichigo-kun again. His eyes widened as he felt more than heard the rip in the sky behind him, and he spun around with Kyoka Suigetsu at the ready just in time to find himself face to face once again with Kurosaki Ichigo, killing intent clearly blazing within his intense, hollow-like Ryatsu. Getsuga 10-. And suddenly, the mask shattered, falling into so many pieces through the air. Aizen was easily able to take advantage of Ichigo's shock to kick him into another building. You were quite strong, Aizen complimented. I dare say if you had managed to complete that attack, you might have actually succeeded in killing me. DMNIT. Ichigo screamed, his body feeling weak and heavy. I had him. How is this right? But before he could continue his thoughts, Ichigo realized that his opponent was coming at him and barely managed to block Aizen's next attack, but then he was sent flying through two skyscrapers and colliding with another. He got up quickly, searching the skies for Aizen. He's so strong. I need more power. Ichigo was completely taken by surprise when a mostly healed Aizen suddenly appeared in front of him, his right hand less than a meter away. Heido 63, Raikoho. The lightning Kido blast completely engulfed Ichigo's form for several seconds, but something began happening in the middle that began to slightly unnerve Aizen. A dark, bitter laugh echoed from within the Kido, and when it faded, Ichigo stood there, with several electrical burns on his arms and hands, but the majority of the damage had been averted by the X-guard he put up with both Tensa Zangetsu, but still the man kept laughing lowly. "It's not fair," he gasped out. "I was so close to ending it, I was about to kill you. You who arranged for my mother's death, you who are the source of so much pain. How could I have failed to kill you when I know that you're going to sacrifice all those people for your own ambition? Why couldn't my mask have lasted for just one more second?" Aizen opened his mouth to speak, but Ichigo just kept going, his words getting stronger as his voice steadied. "But I won't let you do this, I can't let anyone else go through the suffering of losing a parent." Ichigo met Aizen's eyes, and the latter was surprised to see the wizard's eyes. The right eye was normal, brown iris on white sclera, but the left eye was completely hollowified, amber on black sclera. Ichigo's voice was slowly regaining the giveaway hollow echo, and Aizen could swear that Ichigo's skin was paling. "But, he's not bleeding that badly anywhere," Aizen noted in confusion. "What's going on? I will do anything to protect those I care about. I will ascend to the heights of heaven, or descend into the pits of hell," Ichigo vowed, not noticing how his mask was slowly materializing only on the left side of his face. "Angel or demon, those titles mean nothing to me, as long as I can fulfill my desire." He didn't know how he knew the words that came to his lips unbidden. But then again, Ichigo didn't care either, all that he desired was to make the monstrous maestro of his mother's murder die. Ichigo smirked as his soul synced with the hollow within. Black in the night, Cazador de la Luna. Time seemed to slow for everyone watching him as their realizations raced ahead of their thoughts towards the horrifying conclusion. His Zanpakuto was well known to be Zangetsu, that oversized cleaver was hard to miss. That left only one option, Resurrection. Yamamoto's expression was especially grim, a hollow with the combined powers of Bankai and Resurrection could prove a very fatal opponent. "Let us hope Kurosaki Ichigo can recover, or else we will be forced to kill him." And then time resumed, with the white Tensa Zangetsu ripping itself out of Ichigo's left hand, twisting around and seeming to stab him in the chest. Except as it reached Ichigo's skin, it seemed to melt until there was nothing but the chain left, and then everything coalesced into something that every Shinigami there recognized, Ichigo's chain of fate. Then, the chain ate itself away as it had in the shattered, and Ichigo threw his head back and screamed as white, foamy liquid erupted from the new hole in his chest and his own mouth. His mask grew and covered all the way around his head, twisted horns emerging as the liquid spread over his body and underneath Ichigo's Bankai. The wizard's muscles grew taut and far more defined, the skin on his hands and feet tightened and stretched as his nails grew, until they appeared more as claws and talons. From the hollow hole in Ichigo's chest came a pattern of thick crimson lines, two of which reached up and met with those on Ichigo's mask, and more that circled around his torso to meet with their brothers from the back, hidden underneath a sudden growth of Ichigo's hair that now reached down to his shoulders. The transformation seemed to take only a second, and Ichigo's scream of pain transformed into the triumphant roar of a hollow ready for battle. All the conscious wizard in Karakura blinked and turned towards where they felt Ichigo's Ryatsu become far more bestial and hollow-like. Kensei, Mashiro, Love and Rose glanced once more at the slowly dissolving corpse of Wonder Weiss, then each other. The Espada-class Arrancar had been far more troublesome to deal with than they'd thought he'd be. He seemed to have a very strong hierro, could take a beating to rival Ichigo, and attacked unpredictably, resulting in Mashiro's temporary knockout. But between Kensei's Bankai and everyone else's support, plus a surprise attack from Mashiro after she'd recovered, Wonder Weiss had finally gone down only a minute ago. Just to be sure, Kensei walked over warily, returning his Bankai to Shurikai mode, and swiped off Wonder Weiss's head. The dissolving sped up in earnest now, and in several seconds, the child Arrancar was gone. "So, is that?" Love asked. "Yes, it's Ichigo," Kensei stated clearly. "This seems to be one of the results of his deal with his inner hollow." "Another one?" Rose asked incredulously. "First his mask felt stronger, and then that super mask." "What now, Resurrection?" "Maybe," Love answered quietly. It's impossible to know without looking. Then let's go watch Baritan fight. Mashiro chirped. All four nodded, before Shunpai and Ji out to do just that. Nearby, Lisa decided not to go. She was waiting for an opening on Stark in order to help her former Taicho, Kairaku Shunsui. She wasn't quite sure what kind of greeting she wanted, but Lisa needed closure. She'd been abruptly pulled away from her Taicho due to her own incompetence, she felt, and Eizen's betrayal. That she'd never gotten to say goodbye hurt to this day, and Lisa wanted to fix everything. There was no way she could rejoin Soul Society, Lisa knew this, but she wanted at least a cordial relationship with her old Taicho, and maybe with Nanao-chan. Lisa smiled softly as she remembered reading stories to the little girl who grew up to take her place as Shuunsui's Fukuteicho, before her face hardened. She couldn't afford to lose her concentration. Hiyori felt the change in the air, but refused to leave her sitting position on the ground next to the unconscious Shinji, who was being patched up by Hachigen. This is all my fault, she thought deprecatingly. God DMN you, Aizen. And DMN me too, for not growing strong enough to do anything. How long till he's fixed, she demanded. At least another 5 minutes, Hachigen reported. Are you sure you don't want to see what Ichigo is doing? Of course I want to see what that idiot Strawberry's up to. Hiyori retorted. But Shinji needs protection from those Dmed Shinigami who still see us as hollows, and you can't heal and fight at the same time. Hachigen nodded in acknowledgement before returning his full concentration to healing. However, in the back of his mind he was afraid of how the day would end. He could tell from Ichigo's Ryatsu that he was not in control. Would Aizen be defeated, only for one of their own to a mindless hollow of mass destruction? Or would Soul Society take the Vizard as a threat and wage war on them? Hachigen didn't want to relive those first few years on the run, always looking over their shoulders and fearing every shadow on the street. Please, Kurosaki Ichigo, he prayed, come back to yourself. And there we go, that's chapter. A quick glimpse at the Vizard at the end. Oh my. Wonderweiss is dead because there were some extra people to help out, leaving more Vizard to take out the strangely resilient Non-Espada. That means that he's not gonna go suicide bomber on Yamamoto. Meaning Yamamoto's still got his Uber Flames of Doom Megatrap ready. And there's nothing Aizen can do about it. Heh. Oh, wait. Ichigo's out there. And has no idea. So is Yamamoto gonna take the chance and kill both Aizen and Ichigo, or will he hold out hope? Also, I've finally unleashed Ichigo's completely berserk hollow form, the one that killed Okuiora in canon. Yes, you heard me right, Ichigo is not in control right now. And this time, his hollow's purpose is not to protect Inoue. Prepare for mass destruction. And last but certainly not least, Inoue's most devastating technique, stemming from her healing bubble. I hope I didn't make her sound too OOC here, but this was something that I just had to put in. A Time Lord versus a reality rejecter. Seems like something out of Doctor Who. Chapter 22, Second Thoughts. Aizen eyed his opponent critically. Resurrection. I must applaud you, Kurosaki Ichigo. But he was cut off when the hybrid was suddenly in front of him, Tensa Zangetsu already mid-swing. He barely managed a block, but was then caught off guard when his shoulder was sliced open. What trickery is this? Leaping back and trying to buy time to figure out just what had just happened, Aizen was completely caught off guard when he felt something impale him through the stomach, right next to the Ho Jiaku with enough force to alter his path, taking him into a building. Ichigo's new monstrous form seemed to materialize, one claw-like hand gripping what Aizen now realized was the Vizard's sword, the other quite firmly gripping Aizen's throat. Feeling blood running in small rivulets down from small punctures from where Ichigo's sharpened nails had dug into the soft tissue of his neck, Aizen realized that the word claw was perhaps more accurate than he'd first assumed. Trying to suppress a rising sense of panic, Aizen swung Kyoka Suigetsu at Ichigo's arm, hoping to buy enough time to get some distance and work out his next move, only to blocked by Tensa Zangetsu. What? Aizen asked in disbelief, blinking once, before he glanced down. It took less than a second to register that Ichigo had brutally ripped his sword out of Aizen in a diagonal fashion so he could block in time. The pain was strangely absent, though. And then it hit him hard, and Aizen couldn't help but choke up blood over Ichigo's claw that held him in place. Perhaps I shouldn't have antagonized him, the Hogyoku-infused Shinigami realized belatedly, gazing into Ichigo's masked visage, bathed in a red light. Wait, red? Aizen's eyes widened as he looked slightly up, where a Zero was quickly forming, swirling between Ichigo's horns. Aimed right at him. For a split second, time seemed to pause just long enough for Aizen to verbalize, well, sheet. The Zero that erupted forcefully took Aizen out of Ichigo's grasp, leaving long scratches along his neck where Ichigo's claw had attempted to keep its grip. Sent flying once more into another few buildings that were practically vaporized by Ichigo's Zero upon impact, Aizen could feel the Hogyoku working as fast as it could to heal the wounds while strengthening his body's defense, and he reinforced that with his own Ryatsu. Breathing heavily as he managed to stop himself, Aizen suddenly realized that he no longer felt any pain, and in fact felt much stronger than before. Am I in shock? Knowing he had little time, if any, before Ichigo would chase after him, Aizen let his hand feel out where his grievous wound had been, and felt an extremely smooth surface, like glass but not as rigid. Quickly taking an assessment of the rest of his body, he realized he was covered from head to toe in the substance. Realization hit him, and Aizen smiled behind the apparent cocoon. The Hogyoku did this, as I thought, it responds to fear. To protect me against this new Ichigo, it gave me powerful armor, and is currently building its energy for the next transformation should it become necessary. Aizen was utterly unsurprised when Ichigo suddenly appeared in front of him with a sonic boom. He confidently brought his blade against Ichigo's, smiling wider behind the substance when the block completely succeeded. My turn, Ichigo-kun. Meanwhile, Ichigo opened his eyes with a start. Huh? What am I doing here? He muttered, looking around. He was in his inner world, and the sky looked very ominous, overcast with several threatening-looking clouds, drizzling lightly. Strangely, Ichigo could see neither of the spirits that usually inhabited his inner world. Cazador? Zangetsu? Where are you? Heya, King. Ichigo spun around to see Cazador in his Resurrection form with an uncharacteristically serious frown on his face, which gave him a very bad feeling. What happened? Why am I in here? The wizard asked. And where's Zangetsu? I'm not sure what happened, honestly. But I'd bet anything that it has something to do with what you did just a minute ago, Cazador replied. I couldn't tell ya. After Aizen mentioned he took action against our mother, it was raining too hard for us to see outside too well. I think I might have actually gone insane for a bit, Ichigo said slowly, trying to remember everything. It was strangely difficult, perhaps because Ichigo hadn't been fully conscious and aware of what his body was doing. I fought him at full power, a Jutsu's mask, both blades. Then someone shot a missile at Aizen and I escaped with a Garganta. Reappeared, about to kill Aizen, a Jutsu's mask broke. The next part one remember easier. I think the shock brought me back to some semblance of sanity. I called out a release phrase, and your name? Ichigo exclaimed in surprise. Next thing I know, I'm here. Cazador nodded. That explains the strange call on my power. You must have used resurrection. But that doesn't explain why you're here, instead of out there and fighting. I believe that I might be the best one to explain that. Both Cazador and Ichigo spun to the side, not recognizing the voice. The new speaker was clothed completely in a black, hooded garment, shielding him from the light rain. Who are you? Ichigo demanded. Zangetsu and Cazador are supposed to be the only ones here in my inner world. I am not surprised you don't recognize me, this is the first time you've entered your inner world while in Bankai. To Ichigo's shock, the figure drew Tensa Zangetsu and removed his hood, revealing himself to be a young man with long, ragged, wispy black hair that barely reached to his shoulders. Wait, hold on a minute, Ichigo said aloud with a frown. If you have that, then, are you Zangetsu? I am not Zangetsu. Ichigo, what is the name of your Bankai? Ichigo blinked, rubbing his forehead as he tried not to get a headache. So you're Tensa Zangetsu? Are you a separate entity from Zangetsu, because if you are my head is getting rather full. The Bankai spirit smirked in a way that immediately reminded Cazador of the ones Ichigo himself would give on occasion. I am essentially the spirit of Zangetsu at his prime and full power, just as your Bankai enables you to be at your strongest, in terms of Shinigami power. Well, nice to meet you, I think, Ichigo greeted. You think? I get the feeling that since Zangetsu never told me about you, and that you've never spoken to me before when I was in Bankai, you only make yourself known when something terrible is happening or about to happen. Not necessarily, but I can understand how you would make that assumption. What do you mean? When you are in Bankai, you are fighting someone that you could not win without it. In such a fight, the most minor of distractions could kill you, so I did not dare alert you to my presence before we had an opportunity to properly speak. Makes sense, Ichigo, Cazador admitted. Ichigo frowned, but nodded. What about the times that I've been in Bankai here in the inner world? When should I have spoken? Each time you are here and in Bankai, you are fighting for control of your body. When you won, perhaps. But you called out for my older self, Zangetsu, and I knew that any guidance that I could give, it was unlikely that you would trust. So why is Ichigo here? If he got here through meditation, we'd have known it, and Ichigo himself doesn't know why he's here, Cazador asked. Resurrection, Tensa Zangetsu answered simply. The combination of Bankai and Resurrection is extremely powerful, perhaps overly so. One of the side effects of being in a jutsus is the overwhelming hunger, especially when fighting at full power. Cazador nodded. Right, at least until sufficient ajutsus have been eaten. That weakness appears when Ichigo uses his ajutsus mask. Are you saying that? Resurrection enhanced that to the point where the king's consciousness was overwhelmed and forced here. Mostly right, Tensa Zangetsu confirmed. Ichigo did manage to impart one command that his now berserk body has registered as more important than feeding. To kill Eizen. How do I regain control? Are you sure you want to? Came the surprising response. By using Resurrection, you've created the ultimate killing machine, whose sole purpose is to end the life of Aizen Sosuke. Have you not accepted the fact that he must die, in order to safeguard not only your own existence, but that of your friends, of those you protect, of both worlds? It won't mean anything if it doesn't come from my own hand. Ichigo shouted back angrily. Why wouldn't it? Everyone you love would be protected. He killed my mother. Thunder crashed and lightning lit up the sky, the rain beginning to pick up. She was not his only murder, Tensa Zangetsu coldly reminded him, rainwater running down his face. Do you feel that Hitsugaya Toshiro does not deserve a chance for vengeance for his friend, Hinamori? Or that the Vizard should not have the opportunity to avenge themselves? Remember what you fight for, Ichigo. Ichigo's hands clenched into tight fists as he locked eyes with his Bankai spirit. He hated how much sense he made. I fight, to protect. He closed his eyes and recalled the words he spoke to Ishida all those months ago, back when Ichigo had first gained Shinigami powers thanks to Rukia. I want to protect a whole mountain load of people. Ichigo took a deep breath and opened his eyes, glad to see a subtle approval in Tensa Zangetsu's eyes. Unbeknownst to him, the rain had stopped as soon as he made his decision, and the thunderclouds were lightening, though not disappearing entirely. Aizen is a threat that cannot be merely subdued. He's too strong for that, and his ambition will drive him to sacrifice those I protect, and we can't allow that. DMN straight we can't. Cazador agreed enthusiastically, a manic grin on his face. What will you do, Ichigo? I want my body back, Ichigo decided with his eyes narrowed. It may be a killing machine, but it's operating without reason, without the ability to create plans or recognize subtle weaknesses. It may be stronger than Aizen for now, but Aizen isn't stupid. He'll figure out a way to lure it into a trap. Tensa Zangetsu, Cazador de la Luna. Help me. I could cancel your resurrection, and you'd get your body back, Ichigo, Cazador said slowly, but you'll be stuck as a Shinigami, no mask, and low on power. Likewise, if I retract my powers, Cazador de la Luna will be thrown into control, but he'd be surrounded by the Godai 13, who would take him as a threat, Tensa Zangetsu offered. I dare not to that, all of us would die from a misunderstanding. Then I need the ability to retake control of my body as it is. Ichigo declared. Tell me how. The Bankai spirit's smile was almost as predatory as Cazador's could be at times, and Ichigo unconsciously took a small step back as Tensa Zangetsu brought his blade to bear. In order for you to take back your body at its strongest, you must fully embrace your nature, and demonstrate mastery of both aspects of your powers. What do you mean, embrace my nature? The wizard asked, confused. Tensa Zangetsu looked at Ichigo once again, Cazador de la Luna standing beside him. You don't understand, Ichigo, the nature of just what we are, the spirit told him. Both your hollow and I are merely parts of you, representations of your power-given personality based on your own. Ichigo blinked. Wait, just how does that make any sense? I mean, I know Zangetsu, and now you I suppose, are the source of my powers as a Shinigami. He shifted his attention to Cazador. And you're the source of my powers as a hollow. But your personalities were based off of mine. Ichigo gave a short derisive laugh. Yeah, pull the other one. Cazador has always been more bloodthirsty than me, more willing and happy to fight anyone and anything that could pose a challenge. And Zangetsu. He has always been so cool-headed, so wise, so strong and confident, and he was like a mentor to me. He listened and sympathized with my problems, he always explained things so well when I was confused, he was someone that I looked up to and could trust with anything. He was. Ichigo fell quieter in realization. He was what I always pictured as true strength. Tensa Zangetsu nodded solemnly. Zangetsu and I are based on your very soul, Ichigo. The characteristics you respected, the ones you held as synonymous with strength. Calm, wisdom, confidence, the ability to lead, intellect, prideful yet tolerant, the willingness to never give up, the desire to use strength for protection of others. Can you see it now, Ichigo? Ichigo, I once told you that I am the personality you would have had, if you had turned into a hollow that day in the Shattered, Cazador spoke up. And when we first made that deal, when you were convincing Hat and Clogs to let us fight, you said that hollows are creatures of instinct. Just what do you think I am? Make the DMN connection, URETD. I'm your inner hollow. I'm your instinct, all the good and bad parts of it. Everyone has the buried primal instincts of when humans were but savages, the primal push to kill enemies, the need for companionship of all kinds, the fear of death, the aggression to be the greatest, the desire to prove your indomitable might, but strongest of all within you, the instinctual need to protect those you claim as your own, at any cost to yourself. Ichigo was speechless for several moments. A realization suddenly ran through his head that he felt compelled to speak, however. What does this have to do with learning and accepting my nature? The Zanpakuto looked rather irritated at the question. You have not truly accepted the truth, Ichigo. You call yourself wizard, but you have always felt that the hollow powers are Cazador's. Aayawan back to confusion. Aren't they? Fool! Tensa Zangetsu roared angrily. Did we not just say that both he and I are part of you? We are fragments of your very soul. The origin of all your powers, hollow and Shinigami, lies not with us, but you. You, Kurosaki Ichigo, are human, hollow and Shinigami. And until you can accept that, you will never know true mastery of yourself and your powers. Ichigo froze for a moment before his expression twisted angrily. I am not a hollow. Do I look like I have a hole in my chest, or a mask? But you do have a mask, idiot. Cazador reprimanded. Don't you remember that day you asked me just what I was? Ichigo swallowed a lump that suddenly appeared in his throat. Yeah. Zangetsu's my sword, and you're my mask. He didn't want to accept it. But I'm not a hollow. I just have hollow powers because of what Urahara did. Have you never once thought about why Cazador's powers were so strong, so early? Why he was capable of manifesting your mask without your will to save you in your fights in Soul Society? How he could possess your body against the wielder of Senbonzakura? Once again, Ichigo was shocked into silence. Wait, what are you saying? If you had developed artificial hollow powers due to Urahara Kisuke, why did it manifest itself as a personality within you? Tensa Zangetsu pressed on coldly. How could the power become so strong as to overwhelm you within your Bankai state? The answer is simple, King. You've been part hollow a lot longer than you've been a Shinigami. But that doesn't make sense. Ichigo cried out in confusion. I would have known if I were, wait, did you say part hollow? You were, of course, still alive when it happened, so you would never have known had you lived out your natural life, or undergone a Kanso before becoming a Shinigami, Tensa Zangetsu conceded. Remind me, Ichigo, how does a plus soul become a hollow? Too much time being dead without being purified, Ichigo answered promptly. The chain of fate will consume itself given enough time, and the soul undergoes hollowification. Or, the soul could be partially consumed by other hollows, like Inoue's brother. Correct. Humor me, what will keep a soul from moving on without purification from a Shinigami? Ichigo frowned pensively. Rukia had never really gone into this. Sorrow, regret, guilt, fear, too many heavy feelings keeping their hearts grounded to the living world. And what could cause those? Any number of things, I guess. Such as a traumatic event. Yeah, that could do it, Ichigo agreed without thinking. Then his brain caught up, and began making connections. Wait, you can't mean. Yeah, Cazador confirmed. Where did you think your increased willingness to fight and seriously injure those who annoyed you came from? Hold on, you're saying that everyone who experiences a traumatic event of some kind, or suffers from extreme depression, or anything like that, could be part hollow? Ichigo demanded incredulously. Then why don't we have more people like Chad? Think, Ichigo. Do not rely on me for all your answers, Tensa Zangetsu replied coolly. Ichigo wasn't sure he liked the sword spirit, but did as he was told. What's the difference between normal people and Chad? Wait. Normal. Most people don't have Ryatsu, he half-asked, half-stated. And without Ryatsu, no abilities can manifest. You, however, had enough Ryatsu to be able to see hollows even from that young age. Did you never wonder where your immense Ryatsu came from? It's been building itself for years as you fought, as you interacted with spirits. The dots were connecting. Ichigo didn't want them to connect, it would mean that he'd become that which he'd feared and fought against. So you're saying that all this time, my will to fight has been enhanced by latent hollow powers that I gained through the enormous psychological trauma from watching my mother die as a kid? And because I kept using them unconsciously, the powers got stronger until I became a Shinigami? And that's why Cazador could materialize the mask repeatedly on different parts of my body to serve as a shield for my vitals when I wasn't experienced enough to defend myself properly. And since they continued being in use, they got strong enough for Cazador to briefly take over during my fight with Byakuya? By Jove, I think he's got it, the hollow spirit mockingly addressed Tensa Zangetsu. But I haven't become a hollow. Ichigo insisted. I certainly don't have the desire to consume other spirits. Of course you don't. You may be hollow, but you are no less human and Shinigami, Tensa Zangetsu replied as if that explained everything. You only gain that urge and desire when you submerge yourself into the depths of hollow powers, for all strength comes with a price. Ichigo could not help but think, and what will the price for full control of my powers be? So how do we do this? You said I couldn't get my body back until I'd demonstrated mastery of both aspects of my powers. You will fight us together. One-on-one. Before Ichigo could demand what they meant by that, the two spirits touched, and began to merge. The wizard looked at the merging critically, trying to figure out which personality would emerge triumphant over the other. But when the resulting spirit walked out, Ichigo could not help but gasp. The spirit had Tensa Zangetsu's general appearance, black Bankai sword, and right blue eye, but Cazador had had his own influence on the form as well. The left horn of his Ajucha's Resurrection's mask was atop the spirit's head, directly over the hollowified left eye, and the spirit's hair was a bleached white. Tensa Zangetsu was garbed in Ichigo's Bankai coat, though the neckline of the coat held Cazador de la Luna's red frill-like tufts of hair. "Come, Ichigo," the fusion spirit demanded with Tensa Zangetsu's voice, pointing his blade at Ichigo. "Prove to me and yourself that you are ready to accept everything that you are and may be." Ichigo felt a flash of fear, but promptly smothered it under the weight of his determination. "Fine then. If I have to beat you to get my body back, then." With his left hand, he pulled on his Jillian mask, and brought out the ivory Tensa Zangetsu he'd won from Cazador de la Luna. "Let's go." At that moment, Coyote Stark coughed some blood on the ground, and the rest of the wolves he'd summoned through his resurrection faded away. It had been a hard fight, but his sheer speed and ability to manifest dual Ryatsu blades had allowed him to counter almost every attack to what were now his vitals according to the game of Iruni, any part of him that was white. Nellio was just too slow to hit him, so she'd focused on eliminating the wolves that kept trying to distract her two allies. Yukitake had joined her, leaving Shunsui to fight Stark, each of them dual-wielding. To Stark's frustration, several times he'd seen Shunsui tense, as though about to do something, but then leap back and put some distance between them. He guessed that Shunsui had been about to perform a critical strike to eliminate him, but had stopped due to Nellio's pleadings to leave him alive. He almost wished that Shunsui would just kill him, that way Stark could fulfill his loyalty to Aizen, be purified and go to Soul Society, perhaps even laze around a lot more, hopefully with a few friends. Everyone would win, he figured. The Shinigami eliminate a powerful hollow, all the souls I've eaten get to go to Soul Society and move on with their existence, I get what I want, my loyalty to Aizen is fulfilled, what's so wrong with wanting that? More than once, Stark had contemplated simply not blocking or countering Shunsui, to catch him off guard and finally be purified. All of his comrades but Nell were dead or traitors. But his loyalty to Aizen demanded that he give his all to defeat Aizen's enemies, so Stark fought his hardest, and was able to match Shunsui at his own game. But that had all changed as soon as the game had, as soon as Shunsui had called out, "Kajioni. You've been holding back that move all this time." "Sorry, but I don't control my Shirkai, it's only now that she allowed me to use Kajioni." Kayaraku Shunsui finished emerging from the shadows behind the man, holding the right blade of Kaden Kayakatsu inside where Stark's left lung should be. It was a non-fatal wound, but certainly enough to weaken him to the point where, with a whack from Nell's spear on the back of the Arakar's head, Stark fell unconscious, his resurrection fading quickly. With a pop of displaced air, Lilinet reappeared, also passed out. "Thank you, Shinigami." Nellio whispered quietly, picking them up and laying them on the back of the horse part of her body. "Wait, before you go, what's your name?" Yukitake asked. "You've given the two of us a lot to think about." "My name is Nellio Tuo Delshrank, former Espada Trace." "And yourself?" The chronically sick Shinigami smiled warmly at her. "Yukitake Jushiro, Taicho of the 13th Division. Kayaraku Shunsui, Taicho of the 8th Division." The man inclined his head, also wearing a winning smile. "I'm glad to have met the two of you. I pray the rest of the Godii 13 will allow us to live in peace, but I don't have much hope for that." She looked in the direction of Ichigo's fight with Aizen wistfully. "Ichigo has been so kind. I hope I get to see him again. Do you want us to give him a message?" Shunsui offered. The Arankar looked surprised. "You do that?" "Thank you," she exclaimed. The pair of Shinigami Taicho exchanged looks, each wondering what it meant to be an Arankar. Did gaining Shinigami powers affect the hollow so much? Was Nellio an example of the rule, or an exception to it? Did they still feel the need to consume other souls? There was no way to know aside from asking one or experimenting on it, and neither of them wanted to subject Nellio to Mayuri's not-so-tender mercies. This was no time to ask either, as there was still a fight to be had. In the end, there was only one thing to say. "So, what would you like us to tell Ichigo?" Ichigo's Berserk form warred against Aizen, Tensei Zangetsu clashing against Kyoka Suigetsu over and over at high speed, neither of them giving an inch against each other. Despite having gained his armor and increased power from the Hogyoku, Aizen was wary against letting Ichigo's blade touch him again. Unfortunately for him, Ichigo had not left him alone long enough for him to set up any traps yet. That's the trouble of fighting someone who specializes in speed, Aizen thought, frustrated as he once again brought Kyoka Suigetsu up to face Ichigo's next onslaught of high-speed attacks, twisting and contorting his body to dodge what he could, and blocking the rest. "It's just a matter of time, though. I can feel the Hogyoku strengthening me, preparing my body for the next evolution." Spotting the red glow of a by-now familiar Zero, Aizen frowned. He'd never expected to have so much trouble with a single human teenager, despite having put so much effort into the experiment. Heido 90, Kurohitsuji. Apparently sensing the danger, Ichigo's body vanished away in what Aizen vaguely noted was not Shuinpa, but Sonido if the sonic boom was any indicator. The powerful Heido enveloped nothing but air, but it gave Aizen a valuable moment to think of a way, preferably ironic enough for Aizen's tastes, to defeat Ichigo's Berserk Bankai Resurrection blend. Berserk. There's an idea. Aizen began to focus his power into Kyoka Suigetsu as he decided what kind of illusion he needed. Ichigo-kun's never seen me release my Shirkai, so I can't just have him attack someone else. I need to have someone defend me, thinking I'm Ichigo-kun. With any luck, the boy will tear apart any and everything in order to reach me. He began crafting a simple illusion in his head that Ichigo was coming at him, and that Aizen had moved to the side, resulting in their having switched positions. But despite his skill and intelligence, all Aizen had truly had was a moment or two before Ichigo was back to continue his fierce assault. He hadn't finished adding in all the necessary convincing details that were necessary to convince the Taicho of their legitimacy, the feel of wind movements, sound, even smell if that Kamura was among the watchers, before Aizen's mental picture was shattered by Ichigo actually coming at him with all unbelievable speed of a vengeance-possessed berserker. Tensei Zangetsu engulfed in a Getsuga Tensho that Aizen was sure was meant to pierce not the heavens, but his own skull. Thinking quickly and trying to summon a similar enough illusion to use, Aizen attempted the sidestep that he had planned on including in his illusion, simultaneously firing a Heido 63, Raikoho, that yet again was easily dodged by his troublesome opponent. The blast hit another building, which crumbled down around them. "That makes 14 buildings destroyed by us so far," Aizen noted absently. He never uses Bala like my Espada did. Does he not know it? Bakudo 61, Rikujikoro. Wait, what? Aizen found himself bound by 6 rods of light stuck in his midsection, preventing him from moving. He cursed aloud, wondering who had done it, and more importantly, how to quickly get out of it before Ichigo. Too late. Ichigo had reappeared in front of him and taken full advantage of Aizen's binding to give a brutal slash to him, unleashing the Getsuga at point-blank range. However, the results were somewhat surprising. The Getsuga had come down upon Aizen's collar, where the neck met the shoulders, and had successfully managed to shatter the armor around that area. However, it seemed to have used all its energy doing so instead of cleaving him in two it only gave Tensei Zangetsu a chance to give a moderate cut to Aizen's neck, which promptly healed due to the power of the Hogyoku. Undeterred, Ichigo's body leapt back, charging a Zero aimed straight for Aizen's head. But before he could finish, someone knew Shuinpa nearby. "You're welcome for the opening, Ichigo-kun. Urahara Kisuk." Aizen greeted softly. "Welcome to the battle. You were the one who used the Bakudo, I assume?" "Of course," the shopkeeper admitted freely. "It's been a long time, Aizen Sosuke. And it seems you've gone and fused with the Hogyoku." It is not fusion. I subjugated the Hogyoku. You've lost your chance to be its master forevermore, Urahara. Urahara glared at Aizen. Yes, it's true that I failed to master it in the past. But, that is indeed in the past. Right now, you need to be dealt with. Bakudo 63, Seijo Sabaku. Aizen was suddenly surrounded by glowing yellow chains that promptly snagged his arms and tightened them to his sides. Bakudo 79, Kyu Shirbari. 8 black holes the size of Aizen's head materialized around him in the form of a circle, and suddenly a 9th appeared in Aizen's own chest. Limit of the Thousand's hands, respectful hands, unable to touch the darkness. Shooting hands unable to reflect the blue sky. The road that basks in light, the wind that ignited the embers, time that gathers when both are together, there is no need to be hesitant, obey my orders. Do you really think I'll let you finish that spell? Aizen asked, his voice not revealing any fear at all as he struggled to break the Bakudo placed upon him. The chains shattered, and the rods of light trapping him in place cracked severely, but Aizen was surprised when he felt claws gripping his hands and pinning them behind his back. Ichigo's sharpened nails were digging painfully into Aizen's wrists, cracking the armor around them. Well, shit. Aizen couldn't believe he'd almost completely forgotten about Ichigo's presence. Somehow, in that berserk state, he'd still recognized Aizen as the greater threat and was instinctively keeping him from being able to stop Urahara's Kido. Worse, Aizen could feel Ichigo charging yet another Siro between his horns, held directly behind Aizen's neck. This is going to hurt. He braced himself with Ryatsu, knowing that he'd come out of the coming Kido alive, but unsure how much injury he would take in the process. I am beginning to think that I didn't think this all the way through. Light bullets, 8 bodies, 9 items, Book of Heaven, Diseased Treasure, Great Will, Grey Fortress Tower. Aim far away, scatter brightly and cleanly when fired. Urahara cried out triumphantly. Heido 91, Senju Koten Taiho. Several large spears of light materialized around Urahara before shooting forwards towards the bound Aizen. Struggling to free himself from Ichigo's vice-like grip and the Rikujikoro, if only to keep him there and hit by the same Kido, Aizen closed his eyes to shield them as he felt the spears hit and explode violently. At the same moment, Ichigo unleashed the Siro blast in tandem with the explosion, firing at point-blank range. The combined shockwave ripped Ichigo away from Aizen, sending him flying, but Ichigo's body swiftly recovered and appeared on the opposite side of Aizen from him, waiting for the man to emerge from the smoke. Urahara smiled grimly as he saw the burns and tears along Ichigo's body from the impact of the spears heal quickly. High-speed regeneration is truly an incredible thing. I've been lucky that Ichigo is focusing on Aizen, rather than random destruction of everything. What's different than before? You've gotten too careless since you acquired those powers, he taunted. You never would have let me hit you before. You're right. Urahara whirled, hearing Aizen's voice directly behind him, but he knew he was too slow to react in time as Aizen slashed at his shoulder with his bare hand. In the barest of moments, he was able to observe Aizen's physical state. Aizen appeared largely unharmed from the Kido, which Urahara had expected, though his armor was cracked in a couple of places. Where Ichigo had previously shattered the armor, however, was bleeding slightly, though there was evidence that it had been bleeding far more seriously a few seconds ago, if the blood-stained armor in the surrounding area was anything to go by. Urahara couldn't tell what, if any, effect Ichigo's Siro had had on him as Aizen's back was not visible from his angle. The Hogyoku must have healed him. With a mild sonic boom of sonido, Ichigo appeared between them, Tensa Zangetsu wreathed in the black Ryatsu of a Getsuga as it moved to slice Aizen's hand off. To both Urahara's and Aizen's surprise, it succeeded. Taking full advantage of the opportunity, Urahara leapt forward and tapped both of Aizen's wrists before Shunpying backwards. Aizen leapt back, clutching his stump of a wrist in pain as he looked at Ichigo in shock. How can he counter the Hogyoku like this? How can he be able to inflict this much damage on me after I've gained this much power, when his body is acting and reacting purely on instinct? Just then, both arms ringed themselves to behind his back, yellow spiritual energy cuffs keeping them together. His eyes widened as he felt a vague burning sensation within him. What? It's a seal, Urahara explained, turning away and tipping his hat downward over his face. It blocks off the Ryatsu vents located in the wrists of all Shinigami. Thanks to Ichigo, they were nice and exposed for my seal. You'll be incinerated by your own Ryatsu, from the inside out. Goodbye, Aizen Sosuke. And as if his farewell was the trigger, Aizen was enveloped in a pillar of light that reached for the sky. And there's another chapter done. This one fought me a little, but I'm glad I could get it out. Now, Isshin was supposed to make an appearance this chapter, but there was too much going on. Isshin is around though, and he's the reason why none of the other Shinigami have done anything yet to help or hinder Ichigo. I'll go into details next chapter. Anyway, Ichigo ended up not being as badass as I would have liked in this chapter. He was still an unstoppable force, a serious threat to Aizen, but when I really thought about it, what did Ichigo's Berserk form do in canon? It paused after tearing off Okuyura's arm. It fought Okuyura, broke his ultimate attack in one hand, and then cut him down before using Zero on him and mostly obliterating him. Here, because he's focused completely on Aizen's death, Ichigo hasn't done anything to Urahara simply because Urahara hasn't hindered him. But, all in all, only a few minutes have passed since Ichigo used Resurrection in this chapter, so it'll get better. Yep, Stark's done for now. I really couldn't write that out much more than I did here. I really wanted to get Stark's thoughts and opinions in there, how he came across to me. But luckily enough, he wrote himself out to survive with Nellio. The pair of them will be retreating to Hueco Mundo for the time being, but their part in this story has not ended. Now for the spoilers. S. P. O. I. L. E. R. S. P. A. C. E. I'm a bit frustrated at canon at the moment. What the hell, Ichigo? You spent all that time as a Shinigami, you spent years able to see spirits, and you don't check in on your little sister, who's picked up where you left off. And why haven't you checked in on your Shinigami friends? Renji, Rukia at the very least. I'm sure Urahara would be happy to give you updates. Furthermore, you sacrificed your time, sweat and blood to be able to protect your friends and family from harm. What good are you now, without any Ryatsu? Why are you continuing to lie to yourself, that you're happy not being able to see ghosts anymore? You're useless now if any hollows come around, and let's face it, there are still plenty of spiritually aware people nearby that are going to attract them. Ishida can't be in every place at once. And what about your dad? Did you ever get the full story out of him as to who he really is, why he's a Shinigami? It's been a year. Arg. Inoue, why haven't you even tried to reject Ichigo's loss of powers? You're practically a goddess of rejection here. You could reject mortal injuries. You rejected death itself when Okuyura killed him. Why can't you reject his having used the final Getsuga Tensho? Also, what about Chad? Where is he? What's he been up to? He's your best friend, Ichigo. Why didn't you see him in school that day? You saw freaking Kigo. The only decent thing about the latest developments in canon is that Ishida is beginning to detect Ryatsu within Ichigo. That DMN well better mean he's getting his power back, even if it means that he's not a transcendent anymore, transcendent being the term that was used to describe how Ichigo had transcended the dimensions of Shinigami and Hollow when his Ryatsu could no longer be detected by those lower than him unless he chose for it to be. Chapter 23, Fear. Yamamoto watched with his eyes opened as the traitorous Aizen Sosuke fought against the increasingly frighteningly powerful Kurosaki Ichigo. He was carefully watching his surroundings, analyzing the area constantly for any missing minute details, the leaves on trees being identical, for instance, or perhaps a road down below missing a few cracks. It seems Shunsui and Jushiro are done playing with their opponent, he noticed. Now, wait, why isn't their opponent dead? I can feel his Ryatsu still, but it's dropped to the point of unconsciousness. Why haven't they finished him off? Perhaps the woman who was fighting alongside them has betrayed them? Yamamoto took a moment to deliberate on whether he should send someone to check on the situation, before he decided it was not worth it. The two of them are very strong, and not unintelligent. They will be fine. Speaking of betrayals, Yamamoto reached out his senses for one of his most loyal, if relatively new, Taicho, Kamura. The canine-like Shinigami was greatly weakened, but so was his opponent, the blind Tosen Kaneim. Recognizing Hisagai's strong Ryatsu near, if not in, the fight, Yamamoto believed that their situation would be resolved in the Godai 13's favor as well. Only Eizen and Jin were left, then. Yamamoto Soteicho's face darkened as he considered the two of them. At the moment, Jin seemed perfectly satisfied to watch Aizen just as the Godai 13 was. Does he believe Aizen will triumph? Yamamoto's hand twitched, the cane holding his Zanpakuto blackening a little as it was singed by his fiery Ryatsu. Relax, Soteicho. Ichigo's doing fine, a voice said from next to him. The person this voice belonged to was the reason why Yamamoto hadn't evacuated all the Shinigami from the area as soon as Aizen had evolved, and unleashed his last resort. Flashback. Aizen had just been blasted away by Ichigo's first Zero, and Yamamoto was about to give the orders for all the available Taicho to team up against Aizen and take him out, before a very surprising figure appeared before him. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Yamamoto Soteicho. Isshin, Yamamoto recognized. Why are you here? Dressed in the traditional robes of a Shinigami, with a captain's vest wrapped around his left sleeve, Ichigo's father chuckled. Why do you think I'm here? I'm here to help my son, as any good father should do. And why shouldn't I send my forces down to slay Aizen where he stands right now? Kurosaki Ichigo has weakened him. Look again. Yamamoto did so, and to his consternation, it seemed Aizen had fused further with the Hogyoku, gaining new strength and making it much more difficult to hurt him. The connotations made sense immediately, the fight just became that much harder, as a few of the Taicho would now be useless. Soifan's Bankai, while strong, had failed to kill Aizen before and she had weakened in firing the first shot. Kamura, when he arrived, would be fatigued and his Bankai would not pierce the new shell. Hitsugaya was very powerful, but young and his powers were still maturing, it was unlikely he would have much effect either. As Shunsui and Jushiro were occupied elsewhere, that only left Yamamoto himself. Since he was still susceptible to Aizen's hypnosis, he prepared a failsafe in the fake Karakura town prior to Aizen's arrival, his ultimate death trap of fire, Enetsu Jigaku. With its power, anything within the flames would be destroyed, even Yamamoto himself, and he would need to stay in order to ensure that Aizen could not escape. Yamamoto had almost cracked a smile when he realized it would also utterly destroy the remaining Arrancar in the area, sparing Soul Society another threat. Once again, he opened his mouth to give a retreat order to his troops. Soul Society would need to remain strong after he was gone, and Yamamoto would be dead if everything he'd worked for fell away after his death, but Isshin interrupted him again. Let Ichigo handle Aizen. Do you honestly think he, a human who gained his powers so recently, can defeat a highly skilled Shinigami who has practiced for centuries? He's done it before, hasn't he? Isshin quipped with a grin. 2 words, Kuchiki. Byakuya. End flashback. Do not presume to give me orders, Kurosaki Isshin. Wouldn't dream of it. But you have to agree, Ichigo's doing quite well against Aizen. If by quite well, you mean that your son has fallen into his hollow powers and has become a monster that may or may not be worse than Aizen himself, then I agree. Isshin pouted a little. You're so mean. Isshin's antics tempted the nearby Hitsugaya into staring incredulously at him instead of dutifully watching the fight. If this is the influence Kurosaki's had growing up, I think I may need to congratulate him for turning out as well as he did, he decided, before turning back just in time to see Urahara turn up and complete a textbook perfect combination of 3 high-level Bakudo and an impressive level 91 Heido, with Ichigo helping hold Aizen in place before blasting him with a Zero of his own. Note to self, never, ever PSS off Urahara Kisuke. Or Kurosaki Ichigo for that matter. True to form, the younger Kurosaki male had utterly impressed the stoic Hitsugaya Toshiro. Gazing at the horrifying visage of Kurosaki's Resurrection mask, crooked horns aimed forward, combined with the sheer weight of his Ryatsu, which had once again jumped to absurd levels. Hitsugaya shook his head. He'd been forced, along with whoever else could breathe in such dense Ryatsu, to evacuate those who were in danger of dying simply from Ichigo's full presence to the Urahara shop, which was shielded enough to allow them to recover. As it was, Kirifukutecho, Omidafukutecho, and even his own Matsumoto had been overwhelmed. To Hitsugaya's mild embarrassment, the unseated officer Kachiki Rukia had been perfectly able to breathe, though she was understandably terrified. She and Inoue Oriheim were watching from a distance as well, though judging by their expressions, Hitsugaya wasn't sure if that was a good thing. With every second that passed, he could tell that their fear was growing, though Inoue seemed to be handling it better. With good reason, Hitsugaya reminded himself. She just destroyed a veritable god of time. Rukia, however, had never witnessed just how unbelievably destructive, how undeniably hollow, how inspiring of absolute terror Kurosaki Ichigo could be. She had never crossed blades and experienced that precious glimpse into Ichigo's soul from the impact, had never seen Ichigo even pull off his mask and reassure her that he had been in complete control. Even if she had, Rukia wasn't sure that she would have been able to remain calm in the face of Ichigo's resurrection. Is this why it's forbidden to give humans Shinigami powers? What have I done? Are you scared? Came a quiet voice. Rukia whirled, surprised by the unexpected presence, to see 4 of the wizards she'd witnessed come to help earlier. You should be, the one with white hair continued grimly. We are wizard, and there are times that we scare ourselves. Although we've never taken our hollow powers to that level, Kensei. No, we did not trust our inner hollows enough, love. Kensei cast his gaze at Ichigo's new form, his face stern, his voice almost reminiscing in its quality. In a matter of months, he has mastered his hollow powers further than we have in a century. It makes me wonder what we could have done had we truly tried to do more than just ensure our sanity. So Ichigo is still in there? Rukia could not help but ask. Yep. Baritan's still in there, the unexpectedly chipper, green-haired girl confirmed happily. Don't bother, Mashiro. The Shinigami have never understood, Kensei stated darkly, turning away. What do you mean? Rukia asked, confused, but it was not Kensei who answered, but love. The Gotei 13 ordered our execution after we gained hollow powers accidentally, believing that we truly became hollows rather than gaining a dangerous power that we needed to master to keep from hurting everyone around us, Love explained. Secure in their belief that they were right, they didn't bother to check it before they started teaching their ideas of what happened, so no one would question their order. What they don't understand is that we are, by our very nature, predominantly Shinigami ourselves. It's our default state, the form we return to when we're completely exhausted. Urahara stabilized us after Eizen infected us with hollow powers, and gave us the ability to fight for our sanity and win. That relieved Rukia far more than she cared to admit. So, as soon as this battle's over, Ichigo will be able to pull off his mask and return to normal? We don't know, the last of the wizard admitted. None of us have ever achieved resurrection. Rose. Love rebuked, seeing Rukia's fears rise again. If he has trouble, all we have to do is break the mask and he'll return to normal, no problem. Just like a normal hollow, if you break the mask, you break the power. Don't worry, Rukia, Inoue murmured, catching all their attention despite her soft voice. Kurosaki-kun will be fine. Those Arankar, they were able to turn off their resurrection, right? So Ichigo should too, and then he'll be able to take off his mask as usual. Rukia managed a tiny, reassured smile as she resumed watching her human-turned-wizard friend beat the crap out of Aizen. Soifun was watching as well, but her training was failing her. I need to be looking for an opening. But even if I did, can I even do anything? Her mind flashed to when she'd used her Bankai, Jikuho Reikaben. The blast had been beautiful in a sense, spectacular and so full of fierce hope that it would finish Aizen off. But it had failed, it injured him badly, but did not kill him. It provided the perfect opening for Kurosaki, but his forbidden power failed him at the last moment. Any experienced Shinigami could have predicted that result. Forbidden powers are full of drawbacks. I swear I will come at you with all my power. Against her will, Soifen's gaze shifted to the horned hollow mask of Kurosaki's Resurrection as it fought toe-to-toe against Aizen. She'd thought that Kurosaki in his mask had been intimidating and far too hollow for any Shinigami to be. Now Soifen knew that she'd been wrong. This culmination of Shinigami and hollow, this monstrosity, this is Kurosaki Ichigo. Surely everyone now can see why he has to die. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifen could not repress a shiver. After seeing this display of raw power, after hearing Kurosaki defiantly call upon his inner demon by name, she knew that if he ever decided to back up his words, Soul Society would be in flames by the end of the day. She was starting to doubt if even Yamamoto Satecho could stop him before Kurosaki could kill her. But that's why we need to kill him. He's a threat to Soul Society. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifen resisted the urge to clutch her head in her hands, largely because Suzumabachi was still released and it was likely she'd accidentally hurt herself. She had to admit it, if only to herself. She was scared. She was terrified because Kurosaki Ichigo had evolved in a way that was beyond her comprehension, because Kurosaki had proved himself ready and able to wage a war against Soul Society the likes of which would destroy almost everything, in maybe all the worlds. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifen was trained as an assassin from a young age in service to the Shihoin family. She was now the head of the Onamitsukido, and Taicho of Squad 2 in the Godiai. She knew how to recognize when one's mind was entering a cycle that would leave her unresponsive until broken out of. She'd even fallen into it before, when Yoruchi-sama had abandoned her a century ago. The fierce, heartfelt threat that Kurosaki had given her. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Was overwhelming her with fear. Soifen knew, just as powerfully as she knew her Zanpakuto's name, that she'd be seeing Kurosaki Ichigo's Resurrection in her nightmares. But just as she was starting to get a grip and quiet her instincts, which were screaming and begging to run, Soifen's eyes locked with the soulless eye sockets in Kurosaki's mask. The eye contact only lasted for a moment, less than a second, but time seemed to slow and Soifen felt as though she were gazing into an endless darkness. I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifen heard it in her head so clearly that time that she felt her heart stop for what felt like an eternity, but what was probably only a second. Suddenly, she was in a thick fog, thick enough that Soifen couldn't see anything more than a dozen meters away, and while that rang warning bells in her head, she couldn't seem to think clearly enough to figure out why. Turning around, she found herself within arm's length of Kurosaki's Resurrection, which scared her to the point of screaming. Or she would have, but the enormity of Kurosaki's Ryatsu weighed too heavily on her to make a sound. She could barely breathe, let alone move, and her fear just kept rising. Then she saw the mask's mouth begin to open. I warned you. Miraculously, the rush of adrenaline that accompanied those words let her spin around to move into a Shuunpa, running away, but she froze in horror as another Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to appear. She looked over her shoulder, but the first one was still there, and now both were walking towards her with their blades bared. She Shuunpa'd in a different direction, but then a third walked out of the fog. More and more of them made their way out. She was surrounded. Each of the Kurosakis moved towards them, slowly, predatorily, Zanpakuto drawn. Harsh, hollowified whispers reached her keen ears, and Soifin struggled not to succumb to her own fear as she heard them, growing steadily louder every second. I gained this Bankai to trample on Soul Society's pride. I swear. Bankai. Tensa Zengetsu. I will come at you. Angel or demon, those titles mean nothing to me. With all my power. Blacken the night, Cazador de la Luna. As her stark terror reached new heights, Soifin's heart thundered in her ears and all else fell silent. One of Kurosaki's stepped in front of the others. Soifin, Taicho of Squad 2 of the Godii, I am coming for you. Stay away from me. Soifin shunpaed straight upwards, the only direction she hadn't tried yet, but when she broke through the top of the fog, Kurosaki was right there, a Siro in his horns, a Getsuga in his Zanpakuto, his mouth wide open as if preparing to consume her. I swear I will come at you with all of my power. In reality, Soifin's body stiffened, eyes glazed, as her mind locked up in a terrifying illusion as strong as any Eizen could devise within her own psyche. Kamura glared up from his prone position on the ground, at the monstrous insect resurrection form of his former best friend, Tosen Kaname. His Bankai's chest had been crushed from the impact of Tosen's newest hollow technique, Los Nuevos. Of course, through the link to Kamamura's own body, so too was Kamamura's ribs broken in several places. Tosen had grown incredibly strong, but if Kamamura was seeing correctly, more than once he'd gotten a little blood in his left eye from the fight, something was about to make a difference in the battle. Pathetic, Hisagai's voice judged harshly, plunging his sealed sword into Tosen's exposed neck from above. Sight has made you blind, Tosen. Before, you would have seen that coming and countered it without even trying. You are no longer my Taicho. Reap, Kazashini. And with a sharp sound of a scythe cutting the air, Hisagai's blade shifted into its shurikai form within Tosen's throat. Judging from the sharply dropping Ryatsu in the air, Kamamura knew the fight was over. Tosen had been disabled in a spectacular fashion. A moment later, Hisagai shunpaed by his side. I cut his spinal cord in 3 places. He should be unable to move. But Kamamura had a moment of doubt. Tosen had regenerated his arm in the darkness of his Bankai, presumably thanks to his new hollow powers. What are the limits of his regeneration? Is he really done? Leaning heavily on Hisagai for support, Kamamura made his way to his old friend, who had by then released his resurrection, and dispelled his mask. Tosen was back in his Shinigami form, apparently uninjured if not for the fact that he wasn't moving and was face down on the ground. Kamamura. The anthropomorphic canine was unsurprised to hear his old friend's voice. While Hisagai turned over his old Taicho, he spoke to his traitorous friend in the hopes of regaining his best friend. Tosen. Try to not speak too much, your throat was damaged. Since you're breathing, I presume you've regenerated enough to do so, but don't damage yourself further trying to speak just yet. Tosen remained silent, but turned his eyes towards his best friend. You said it was destined for us to cross blades. I knew that as well, Kamamura admitted. I'm sure Hisagai felt the same. But I do not want any of us to die today. Tosen looked about to say something, so Kamamura quickly continued. I don't expect you to stop being angry, nor will I tell you to stop hating. You have that right. All that I ask is that you don't let revenge consume you, my friend. I do not want to lose you, like you lost your friends so long ago. To lose you, would break my heart, Tosen. Tosen's face softened, an unexpected tear trailing down his face. Thank you. Kamamura. Hisagai, please, come closer. I don't have my mask on, but the hollow powers remaining inside me allow me to see for just a bit longer, and I want to remember your face. Hisagai silently did as was beckoned, standing beside Kamamura Taicho and gazing into Tosen's eyes. After several moments, Tosen let out a small smile of gratitude. Thank you. With that, his eyes fluttered closed, and his breathing slowed as the hybrid loosed his grip on consciousness. Kamamura turned his head slightly at Hisagai. I don't believe I need to tell you what to do now, do I? Hisagi smirked in response. No, Kamura Taicho. He knelt and scooped Tosen onto his shoulder before flickering into Shunpa. Despite the no doubt pressing need for assistance against Aizen, Kamura took a moment to smile. He and Hisagi had succeeded in bringing their friend back from within the unrecognizable revenge-driven man that Tosen had become. It's strange, but I may need to thank Aizen for killing the central. Their views would have demanded Tosen be killed, but perhaps I can convince Yamamoto Taicho to be lenient. With that hope in mind, Kamura Shunpaed away to join the mass of Taicho, hoping to be able to help in some fashion. There were not many things that could leave Yukitake Jushiro speechless. Watching Kurosaki Ichigo, in a completely hollow form but still retaining his rather memorable Bankai, work together with Urahara to systematically demolish Aizen was something he was not quite prepared to see, however. He'd seen Ichigo pull on his mask earlier, but that mask was definitely not the same as what was on Ichigo's face now. The implication that now Ichigo had two sets of hollow powers, or that his original set had undergone an extreme evolution, potentially mid-battle, was simultaneously frightening and humbling to contemplate. Ichigo's growth rate is, no other way to put it, outrageous. It shouldn't even be possible, but in a year's time he's grown from a simple human with high spiritual awareness to this. It was like the man was born for battle. So, why aren't we doing anything? Kairaku asked his best friend with a nudge. Do you want to try to interrupt Ichigo's fight with Aizen right now? Yukitake replied back instantly, not moving his eyes from the battle. The off-drinking Taicho took another look at the fighters before shaking his head in a negative fashion. What happened to the kid anyway? He called on his forbidden hollow powers, Yamamoto intoned, his eyes opened slightly from the slits he usually kept them at. He unleashed a resurrection, and has not spoken since. His ryatsu and movements indicate that he is not in control any longer. But he's still only going after Aizen, even when the easier target Urahara is there. Kairaku whistled lowly at that. DMN. He's a pretty interesting kid, don't you think, Jushiro? Very. Of course he is. He's my son. Isshin jumped in. Just what is he? Ah, Kamura Taicho. Kairaku greeted. I see you. A nightmare. There was silence for a moment as everyone turned to Soifun, who was still watching Kurosaki's fight with Aizen like her life depended on it. With a flash of guilt and self-reproach, Yukitake realized that she was not far off the mark. She was a relatively new Taicho, being in the position for less than a century. Truth be told, Soifun was not an exceptionally strong Taicho when it came to fights such as this. She was an assassin at heart. She sought ways to finish the fight quickly, always improving her speed rather than strength, as her Shirkai allowed her to end anyone's life with 2 strikes. If Ichigo, who was far more suited for drawn-out wars at full strength, failed, then Soifun would have to rely on himself, Shunsui and Yamamoto, who had all been exposed to Aizen's Shirkai. Nothing could be guaranteed then. Of course, Soifun, being the perfect assassin, was waiting for an opportunity to stick her blade into Aizen's back. Yukitake smiled grimly. If there was nothing else he could count on Soifun to remain as cool-headed and focused on the goal as Shunsui was casual and joking. A nightmare? Wait, I get it, Kairaku spoke up. I see what she means. Well? Hitsugaya asked after a moment of silence. A human is never supposed to be given Shinigami powers, right? Kairaku pointed out. Because the living aren't supposed to have the powers of the dead. And it's forbidden for a Shinigami to gain hollow powers. Not only that, but he's advanced very high on the tier in both Shinigami and hollow powers, with Bankai and Resurrection. All that power in the hands of a living human with no affiliation to any government. Can you see how hard it would be to defeat him if he ever decided we were his enemies? We would win, Yamamoto declared, his voice low, but it would likely result in high casualties. It won't happen unless you're all very stupid. Several pairs of eyes turned to Isshin, who had made that bold statement without hesitation. Ichigo has friends in Soul Society all over the Godai, friends like Kuchiki Rukia and Aburai Renji. And if there is anything that you should know by now about Kurosaki Ichigo, it's that he will defy any and everything to protect his friends. Why else would he come after Kuchiki Rukia? Now stop thinking the worst of my son and watch him win. So he is not a nightmare of heaven, but of hell. Kurosaki Ichigo, Hell's Nightmare, Kairaku dubbed him jokingly, but no one was laughing. Instead, they were all watching. Aizen had just been enveloped in a column of Ryatsu. Ichigo's Resurrection's grip on Tensa Zangetsu tightened as the pillar of light faded. Spotting this, Urahara smiled sadly, knowing that the fight was not yet over. Yeah, it'd be too much to hope for Aizen to be finished off from just that. Then he'd just be a regular monster. The light faded entirely, and Aizen emerged in a new, but somewhat familiar form. He appeared much as he had before the Hogyoku had transformed him, but now he had long, sleek hair that reached down his back, and his uniform had apparently regenerated with some minor changes as to where the slits in the clothes were. Intriguingly, Aizen's eyes had also changed, now being gray with purple sclera. It reminded Urahara forcefully of Ichigo's own eyes when he donned his mask, amber with black sclera. While Ichigo took on the eyes of his inner hollow, a part of Urahara wondered where the gray and purple had come from. If the Hogyoku was responsible as he suspected, was there an entity within it that Aizen was now calling on? That was a very good attempt, Aizen congratulated. If it were anyone else, this fight would be all over in your favor. Or rather, had I not implanted the Hogyoku into myself, then I would probably be dead, or powerless as my own Ryatsu burned all my power away. But as it is, the Hogyoku is beyond your understanding. Perhaps, Urahara conceded. But even if it is, that doesn't stop one thing from being true. Oh. And what's that? You've got an enraged vizard at his strongest right behind you. Aizen merely smiled as Ichigo's berserk body once more threw his head back to scream his challenge to the heavens. So I do. Come, Kurosaki Ichigo. Let's see how you do now that you've helped me evolve to this state. Still watching from afar, Yamamoto's cane burned away, revealing his Zanpakuto. Evacuate the area. Isshin Shunpaed right in front of him, pleading. You can't mean. He hasn't lost yet. Do you mean me to delay long enough for my trap to be ineffective? Yamamoto replied coldly. But my son. He may still survive. I will not hinder his leaving the vicinity, the Sutecho promised. But I will not wait any longer. He vanished into Shunpa, and the rest of the Taicho watched Isshin's face turn cold and hard with determination until he too flickered away. Hitsugaya felt a chill run down his spine when he recognized the look. He had recently seen that look on Ichigo's own face, and he knew that the situation was about to get far more dangerous in the immediate area. Let's get everyone out of here, Kairaku commanded, his voice and face devoid of their usual joviality. Hitsugaya, you evacuate Matsumoto, Renji, Rukia, Chad and Inoue. Soifun, get Omida, Kira, Ikaku and Yumachika, then check if anyone is at the Urahara shop and evacuate them too. Kamamura, alert the Vizard and then fetch Hisagi. They aided us in this battle, so the least we can do is warn them. Bring everyone to a point 5 miles north of Karakura. Jushiro and I will alert the errand car that defected from Aizen before doing a sweep of the area. Does everyone understand their orders? Go. All of them disappeared a moment later. And that's the end of that chapter. Things are about to get very, very serious. If any of you are wondering why Soifun is now somewhat responsive, it's because Kairaku was serious. That happens very, very rarely. It's shocking enough to break her out of her catatonia. Now, I know that people will be wondering just what the hell changed to let Tosen live. There are two prominent theories out there concerning Tosen's canon explosion since we don't have a Word of God messages. Theory number 1, Aizen did it. Somehow. Specialized theories involve clever use of illusions and/or high speed and/or Kido. Theory number 2, Tosen's body exploded due to his resurrection in some fashion. Popular opinion is that his body couldn't handle the hollow powers, or that his inner hollow decided to implode them both in their moment of weakness rather than forever serve. I determined what theory I was going to follow through the use of clever logic. Wizards exist, and have gone full hollow form before, they had to in order to master their mask. Some of the wizards were Fukutecho, and supposedly weaker than Tosen. If Tosen's body couldn't handle it, then some of the wizards should have died. They didn't, so Tosen's body could handle it, and therefore that theory is disproven. But wait, the wizards haven't used resurrection. Ichigo has, and he hasn't exploded. I'm interpreting his newest canon full hollow form, kicking Okuyura's butt, form as his resurrection. Since theory 2 is disproven, though I won't throw out the possibility of Kubo saying that is what happened just to screw with us, all I have left is theory 1, Aizen did it. Now, since in my FIC Aizen is more than a little busy trying to keep from being Getsuge-ed or Shiro-ed or quite simply stabbed to death, he never had the opportunity to kill Tosen. So he'll live. Anyway, now to canon rants. Chapter 24, Inferno. Kurosaki Isshin was many things. To his family, he was best known as an over-the-top emotional old man who liked to fight his son at practically every given occasion, but who also had his moments as an extremely wise father. To his colleagues in the medical field, Isshin was an outstanding doctor who owned his own practice and worked closely with the owner of the nearby hospital, Ishida Ryukin. But to most of the Shinigami who remembered him, Isshin was not someone to mess with, ever. The former Taicho drew his trusty Zanpakuto, Enjetsu. It's been a long time, old friend. Enjetsu said nothing, but Isshin could feel the blade's satisfaction at being wielded once more. Isshin smiled mirthlessly, his eyes firmly on Aizen as he charged his own Ryatsu into the blade. If only Ichigo was conscious to see this, Isshin thought with a hint of his usual humor. Come on, Ichigo, hurry up. Aizen, completely focused on his two opponents in front of him, he'd maneuvered so he could see both Urahara and Ichigo in the last few seconds, was caught off guard when Isshin shunpaed right behind him. In that scantest of moments between the time when Isshin appeared and when the sword struck Aizen, the traitor had begun to spin to counter, only to realize that Ichigo had taken full advantage of his distraction and was similarly swinging his own Tensa Zangetsu from point-blank range. Father and son brought their swords down in mirrored two-handed strikes, showing a strange sort of symmetry in opposites. Shinigami and Hollow, in identical positions on opposite sides of Aizen. Isshin with his blue-white aura around his blade, Ichigo with his practically seething red and black version. In that seemingly frozen moment, Urahara was in awe of the in-life metaphor for that perfect blend of Shinigami and Hollow that he dreamed of but was too afraid to try. And then the moment ended, and two voices spoke together, one a clear, strong voice, the other harsh and low. Each demanded Aizen's demise. This was the voice of the Kurosaki. Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo, meanwhile, was struggling against the combined manifestation of his powers. He thought of it as Tensa Zangetsu since he seemed to be the dominant personality, and the appearance of the fusion form seemed to far more closely resemble the Bankai spirit. Something was confusing Ichigo, however. They'd been fighting for some time now, but while Tensa Zangetsu was forcing Ichigo to fight at his limits, it was easily apparent to the wizard that Tensa Zangetsu was not fighting at his own best. Several times now, he'd stopped pursuing Ichigo just long enough for the substitute Shinigami to catch his breath or recover from an opening that provided plenty of opportunity for the hybrid spirit to strike and finish him. Why aren't you finishing me? Ichigo cried out after one such instance, shoving Hollow Ryatsu at his latest injuries, a couple of gashes on his right arm, cracked bone on his left. Why should I? Tensa Zangetsu replied calmly, in a ready position should Ichigo come at him again, but not actively pursuing. This is not your test for Bankai, where only true danger to your life would force you to improve fast enough. I am merely training you so you may be even stronger when you emerge. Enough talk, prepare yourself. Ichigo had no time to argue, instead bringing his sword to bear, blocking the spirit from inflicting a major wound to his torso. I need to win. If he could just bring out the ivory blade he'd won from Cazador de la Luna, Ichigo might be able to take advantage of Tensa Zangetsu's being focused on the current clash. But the Bankai spirit was simply too strong. Ichigo couldn't afford to block with any less than his full strength, he had to use both hands on his single sword. Fine then. Getsuga Tensho. Tensa Zangetsu was forced back into another skyscraper by the enormous Getsuga that emerged from the Bankai that Ichigo wielded, but did not falter. His eyes remained unchanged, still calm, still completely in control as Tensa Zangetsu forced the technique upwards into the sky. The Getsuga is the technique that I give you, Ichigo. What makes you think that it would be sufficient to defeat me, when you have not even mastered it yet? What do you mean? The next moment later, Ichigo brought up his weapon to defend against Tensa Zangetsu, who showed no signs of struggle behind their swords, which shuddered and fought for dominance. The Getsuga Tensho is a compression of your energy. Tell me, Ichigo, how powerful that same blast would be if instead of being so large, it was half as large with the same amount of energy behind it. Despite being obscured behind the hollow mask he wore, Ichigo's eyes were clearly surprised to the fusion spirit. I see you understand. Getsuga Tensho. Oh sure dash. Ichigo was sent flying, holding the incredibly powerful Getsuga, only the size of his own body, back with all his strength behind his Bankai sword. Ichigo winced as the Getsuga pushed him into and through two buildings, metal beams and glass stabbing into his back, before it weakened enough for Ichigo to shunt it upwards just as Tensa Zangetsu had done to his a moment ago. Come on, Ichigo, think. He ordered himself. Tensa Zangetsu told me I can't take control of my body until I accept that I'm hollow and Shinigami together. Then Tensa Zangetsu told me to attack him in order to prove that acceptance. Now he's telling me that he's just training me until I emerge. Is he tricking me somehow? What are you doing, Ichigo? Ichigo spun, seeing Tensa Zangetsu standing on top of one of the many flagpoles on a nearby skyscraper, his outfit billowing impressively in the breeze. I'm trying to work something out. How am I supposed to just accept that I'm a hollow? Worse, how am I supposed to show it? Eat a soul. I'd rather not. Of course not. Maybe I'm supposed to demonstrate some hollow powers. Ichigo quickly threw his left hand forward, holding his fingers in a familiar position as he channeled his hollow's Ryatsu to them, and felt the Ryatsu leave his fingers and start to intertwine into a red orb of destruction, growing larger. Ha! You'd think I'd stop being surprised by how instinctively easy the hollow powers are. See? I've got a zero. Isn't that enough proof of my acceptance? Tensa Zangetsu's expression turned into an almost angry frown. No. You still see it as one of Cazador de la Luna's powers. Stop trying to evade the lesson, Ichigo. You are a hollow. Ichigo shook his head violently. I am a wizard. Then why do you always rely on your Shinigami powers? Tensa Zangetsu demanded. It's always Getsuga Tensho, never Zero. You never use your hollow powers unless you need to. Admit it, Ichigo. You are uncomfortable with the hollow powers because you are afraid of how easy they are, how familiar they are to you, how very natural they feel. I don't use my hollow powers because I didn't want the Godii 13 breathing down my neck about them, especially after what they did to the other wizard. Ichigo yelled back, firing his zero. Tensa Zangetsu easily dodged the incoming beam and gripped his sword. You are making excuses, Ichigo. Once again, the two clashed blades, breaking apart and coming at each other time and again, striking and dodging and blocking, yet neither were landing a blow on the other. You could have ended this war very early on if you just used a Garganta to get away from the wielder of Shinso and attacked Aizen from behind. So the thought didn't occur to me, I can't think of everything. Ichigo fired a newly improved Getsuga, much smaller than before, but still larger than the one Tensa Zangetsu had retaliated with earlier. It rocketed towards Tensa Zangetsu with much improved speed, but the spirit merely dodged before continuing the assault on the wizard. You removed your mask against Jin. Tensa Zangetsu pressed, using Shunpa continually to create the illusion of dozens of himself around Ichigo, and as a result his voice seemed to come from all directions as well. The mask was overkill. Ichigo argued, straining his keen eye to figure out where Tensa Zangetsu was going to strike. It. Gripping his sword by the chain on the hilt, he quickly spun around in a circle on the spot 3 times, sending a spiral-shaped Getsuga in all directions. The Getsuga caught Tensa Zangetsu, but the spirit was prepared for such an event, easily deflecting the attack and firing a Getsuga back at Ichigo. There is no such thing as overkill when you have to finish quickly. Ichigo narrowly dodged, though it cut a slice through part of his Bankai coat on its way past. I thought you liked it when I fought every battle as an effort to improve my skills with you. I also told you I'm a practical man. It is practical to blow through all your enemies when your family and your life is on the line. Tensa Zangetsu scolded as he continued to press the attack towards his wielder. Ichigo met the attack unflinchingly, angrily blocking and deflecting the attacks and attempting to counter where he could. I had to hide my true power so it could surprise Aizen. Hide it? Aizen knew you had hollow powers, just as he knew that your body transformed into a hollow when Cazador de la Luna was in control. Of course he would know that you would evolve that way. It would have been a far better surprise to use Zero to eradicate his head or his heart from a distance. Ichigo screamed in fury as the fusion of his Zanpakuto and his hollow systematically tore down every one of his arguments with cold hard logic to bring out the ugly truth. Firing another Getsuga, which put some distance between them, Ichigo glared at the manifestation of his powers with all the anger he could muster. Fine. I don't like my hollow powers. And why is that, Ichigo? Tensa Zangetsu demanded. Because a hollow killed my mother, another almost killed the rest of my family, and hollows always go after loved ones first before attacking anyone who can feed them. I don't want to be a hollow because I don't want to be a danger to my family, I don't want to always hunger for souls, I don't want to be a monster. There it was, the truth about Ichigo's feelings, raw and out in the open. What makes a person a monster? The question caught Ichigo flat-footed. He'd just finished spilling his heart out, and Tensa Zangetsu's calm, non-accusing tone came as a complete surprise. He'd expected an angry retort about how hollows are not monsters but victims, possibly using Cazador de la Luna's voice. Hearing an explanation about why he was not a monster was also not out of the question. But this? Well, a monster is someone who does terrible things because he enjoys it. Do you do terrible things because you enjoy it? Of course not. Ichigo replied, slightly hurt that Tensa Zangetsu had to ask. Then by your own words, you are not a monster. What difference, then, does being hollow make? That's the question, isn't it? Now that he'd admitted his feelings aloud, it seemed easier for Ichigo to think about the possibility with something resembling rational thought. Even if Tensa Zangetsu didn't say it, Ichigo could feel that the spirit was not judging him, but forcing him to accept his feelings and move on, always looking forward. Ichigo lowered his sword, a pensive frown on his face as he wrestled with his emotions. If he was indeed a hollow, if Ichigo was actually both hollow and Shinigami, and not just a Shinigami with hollow powers, would knowing that make any difference now, if he'd been that way for this long? If he'd already been unknowingly drawing on his hollow side for most of his life, and more obviously recently? How would the knowledge of the truth affect who he was? More and more, the answer seemed to be obvious. I am hollow. Ichigo murmured hesitantly. I am hollow, and I am Shinigami, he said again, more strongly, though with a tinge of sadness. The truth is a terrible thing. Ichigo thought to himself morosely. To gain the power inborn in truth, I had to sacrifice the happy innocence of ignorance. Tensa Zangetsu smiled before splitting back into his separate halves. You are Vizard. And for the first time, Ichigo truly understood what those 3 words meant. It meant that he was Shinigami and hollow, with all the benefits and downsides that came with it. Ichigo would have the powers of Bankai and Resurrection, of Getsuga and Zero. His Shinigami side would cover up his hollow hunger, his hollow side increased the potency of his Ryatsu beyond that of Shinigami capabilities. In trade, Ichigo would always be watched, held at arm's length by those who were either Shinigami or hollow, but not both. The Gotei 13 would always fear that he'd snap and attack them as a hollow, Hueco Mundo would always fear that he'd go on a killing spree and purify them all as a Shinigami. And you know what? As long as I can protect those I care for, as long as I can have my close friends support me, I can live with that. You good, King? Ichigo smirked at his hollow reflection. Yeah, I'm good. Abandon your fear. Look forward, Tensa Zangetsu ordered firmly. Cazador de la Luna gave an identical smirk back. Move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate, Ichigo finished, the words having been engraved in his heart since they'd been spoken all that time ago, when he met Zangetsu on the day he'd regained his powers in Urahara's basement. Now, Ichigo. Call me out. Ichigo's Ryatsu flared high into the sky as he called forth his Ajucha's mask and materialized his hollow Zanpakuto. Black in the night, Cazador de la Luna. The double Getsuga Tensho attack that Kurosaki Isshin and Ichigo had performed together created a column of Ryatsu that reached high into the heavens and churned rocks and dust from the earth, equally divided down the middle, Isshin's blue-white Getsuga against Ichigo's obsidian and crimson, with Aizen in the middle and hopefully being devastated by the two-sided assault. Both father and son jumped back, again in stereo, as they waited for the attack to die down. After several seconds more, the Getsugas both fell unstable and exploded, and the resulting blast of wind blew past the unmoving Kurosakis and Urahara. When the dust cleared, to Isshin's satisfaction, Aizen had been injured, especially on the side that Ichigo had attacked from. This came as no surprise to the father, as Aizen's Ryatsu was impossible to read for him. Aizen had evolved away from that of a Shinigami. Ichigo, who was well on his way to evolving as well, naturally had a better chance of affecting him. Getsuga Tensho. I understand that attack now, Aizen stated loud enough for everyone to hear him as the Hogyoku began to heal his wounds. But now it is time for you all to understand my power. Unseen by anyone. Within the darkness of Ichigo's mask's eye holes, two amber eyes opened. He was awake. You understand the Getsuga Tensho, he growled. What you need to understand, Aizen, is that you've set me off. Aizen spun in shock, only to find Tensa Zangetsu lunging for the throat, covered in a Getsuga that promised to take his head off. He ducked down, only to realize that Ichigo had apparently anticipated that and charged a tri-focused Zero at his fingers, aimed right for Aizen's head. Oh, that's just not. Zero. Aizen managed to bring Kyoka Suigetsu up to help hold it off, but he was pushed back, hard, into the ground over 100 feet down. But while the smoke had yet to clear, Ichigo lowered his horns and fired another two Zeros, as powerful as he could make them, at Aizen, then followed it up with a Getsuga Tensho with its power as compressed as he could make it on short notice. No such thing as overkill, Tensa Zangetsu. Ichigo. Overkill much? Apparently it was the wizard's turn to be surprised, because Ichigo was completely taken aback when he saw his father dressed up in Shinigami robes with a Taicho's Haori untied to his shoulder. Dad? Urahara was barely able to hold back a snort of laughter. Ichigo had become the scariest combination of Shinigami and Hollow he'd ever seen, and to see that monstrous form's body language give off shock at seeing its completely Shinigami father tickled his sense of humor perfectly. Listen, I know you've got questions, Ichigo, but... Save it. You're here, Aizen's probably still alive, you can explain when he's dead. Ichigo told him. But... Unless something really bad is going to happen in the next few seconds, shut up and fight. Yamamoto's going to torch this entire fake town within the minute using a trap designed to incinerate everyone in it, including Aizen no matter what illusion he spawns, Isshin explained in a matter-of-fact voice. Bad enough? There was a moment of silence. Okay, that qualifies as really bad. Let's get out of here. Yoruchi. Urahara called out. The goddess of Shunpa appeared the next instant next to him, wearing strange, thick white armor from her knees down and her elbows out to envelop her hands. Looks like Yamamoto-ji decided to take his turn. Time to leave. You got it. The pair of exiled Shinigami crouched down for a moment, then vanished at speeds of Shunpa that even Ichigo had trouble matching using his Jillian-masked Bankai. What about my friends? The other Taicho are getting them, Ichigo, now hurry up and go. Reassured of his friend's safety, Ichigo channeled his Ryatsu and vanished into Shunpa himself. However, only Isshin heard a tiny sonic boom as well. Ichigo's Shunpa had been at least in small part a sonido. The elder Kurosaki paused for a moment, looking down at where Aizen had impacted the ground and been barraged by Seros and a Getsuga just a few moments earlier. The shadowy figure of Aizen, obscured by the dust still settling, was getting up from the deep crater. DMN it. Yamamoto appeared next to him in a flicker of pure Shunpa, Ryujin Jaka drawn and an aura of fire around the aged Shinigami. The air suddenly seemed both hot and heavy, almost unbearably so. It was obvious that the Suteicho was taking this battle extremely seriously. Kurosaki Isshin. I see that your son has regained his senses. Yeah. Despite the man having been willing to kill his son just a few moments ago, Isshin didn't really want Yamamoto to die. He was a strong Shinigami, and while Yamamoto was a bit old-fashioned, he truly did have soul society's and the living world's best interests at heart. Isshin understood the predicament Yamamoto was in: kill one man of questionable loyalty at best to destroy a threat that would happily kill thousands. The Suteicho opened his eyes. Go, Isshin. If Aizen escapes my trap, then you will be needed. The younger Shinigami looked once at Yamamoto's expression, then nodded and flickered into Shunpa to follow his son. With that distraction out of the way, Yamamoto flared his Ryatsu so that Aizen would have no choice but to feel and see it. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. It's time to spring this trap. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. Came Aizen's voice as he rose from the debris where Ichigo had repeatedly struck him, the last traces of high-speed regeneration revealing itself by healing a gash across his chest. I'm surprised. If Ichigo-kun had kept up his assault, I'm not sure I would have survived. However, you have no chance. Oh. And how is that, Aizen Sosuke? Don't get me wrong, I recognize that you are extremely strong, Aizen went on. Master of the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto, Ryujin Jaka. In fact, in a one-on-one battle before my evolution, would have lost, badly. And what makes you think that your evolution is enough to best me? Shall we see? Yamamoto swung his blade once and streams of fire leapt around the pair of them, apparently locking them inside a spherical prison of flame. There is no escape this time, Aizen. No negation, no espada, nothing shall allow you to evade my blade. Nothing. I propose your death will allow it simply enough. Aizen let out a small, knowing smile. Humph. Do you really think you can cut me down with only that much power? I already have. Yamamoto snarled angrily as he swung his fiery sword, flames lunging at Aizen, only for the image to shatter. Spinning around to counter, he was too late. Aizen's illusion-type Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, entered Yamamoto's right lung with an almost surgical feel to it, as though Aizen were being careful and going slow to ensure he was cutting the right spot. Yamamoto coughed up blood over Aizen's arm, but gripped it with his free hand. I have you now. Are you sure? Aizen suggested with another secretive smirk. How can you know if this is illusion or not? If I were relying on my skin, my ears or my eyes, would be fooled by your Zanpakuto, Aizen Sosuke, but there is one sense you have not blocked. Yamamoto declared in his rumbling voice. I can sense Kyoka Suigetsu, and I know that I hold on to the real you. So what if you have? Aizen asked, conceding the point. Any damage you do to me will be regenerated by the Hogyoku, whereas you will die. Not if I destroy your entire soul right here, right now. Aizen snorted. There is no Kido for that, and you are no Quincy. No, but have you noticed any similarities between Ryujin Jaka and the Sokayaku? Yamamoto queried, coughing a little more blood onto his beard. Aizen's widening eyes showed the old Shinigami that he suddenly understood. Intense heat. Oh yes, the venerable Soteicho agreed. Heat so intense, it will vaporize your soul faster than you can regenerate. But this amount of heat you have here isn't enough, Aizen protested, regaining his confidence quickly. True. Yamamoto tightened his grip while he dismissively gestured with Ryujin Jaka to release the fire prison, and release the trap he'd set up. Over a dozen pillars of fire erupted in various points of the fake Karakura town, and Yamamoto let loose a victorious grin that bared his teeth as he saw Aizen's rising panic. But I am master of the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto. Wonder Weiss. Aizen summoned. Come to me. Yamamoto waited. He had expected Aizen to have some sort of plan to deal with him, but was confident he could handle anything the traitor could throw at him. But even he was somewhat surprised when nothing happened. Wonder Weiss. It seems your backup plan has failed before it even had a chance to begin, Yamamoto judged. Aizen couldn't believe this was happening. He'd designed Wonder Weiss's Resurrección, Extinguer, to be the perfect counter to Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka. He'd known that Yamamoto would attempt to kill him with some overwhelming fire attack, and had planned to use Wonder Weiss to not only stop it, but turn it against Yamamoto upon the modified Arrancar's inevitable demise. Calm down. Alright, let's assess the situation and make some options. Wonder Weiss was most likely dead. Kyoka Suigetsu was still lodged in Yamamoto's chest, and his arm was being gripped too hard to move it and kill the old Soteicho. Aizen couldn't see Jin anywhere, but figured that he was probably fighting someone at the moment, or busy escaping Yamamoto's trap. Ichigo was no longer Berserk, so he couldn't be directed to cut through Yamamoto to attack Aizen. Tosen was likely dead as well. There was no one in the area besides himself and Yamamoto to use his hypnosis on. Yamamoto was too strong for most Kido. Aizen quickly ran through the list of Kido he knew, searching for a Bakudo strong enough to inhibit Yamamoto's Ryatsu or force him to release his grip, or a Heido powerful enough to take Yamamoto's head off. Several Bakudo that came to mind, one was Bakudo 79, Kyushibari, but Aizen's proximity would mean that he too would be affected. Bakudo 63, Seijo Sabaku would have been more promising, if only it were a little more powerful. Yamamoto's pure brute strength would easily break it. Hakufuku, one of Hinamori Momo's specialties, was too weak to affect Yamamoto. Bakudo 99, Kin and Bankin, which both physically and spiritually bound their victims, would have been ideal, but they required hand seals which were at the moment unavailable due to Yamamoto's unbreakable grip. Those would have been perfect. Hold on. Aizen began to smile. Bakudo 99, Bankin. You bluff, Yamamoto snarled. You cannot complete that Kido without hand seals. Are you sure? First song, Shiryu. Spiritual fabric manifested behind Aizen and flew towards Yamamoto, quickly wrapping him up from the bottom up, leaving only his head and the arm that held Aizen alone. Yamamoto flared his Ryatsu as high as he could. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. His loyal blade erupted into flames, burning the fabric, revealing the truth. If this were true spiritual sealing fabric, Aizen, then I would have far more difficulty releasing my Zanpakuto. Even if I could, my fire would have difficulty burning it. Your illusion is useless, I will not let you go. Shatter, Kyoka Suigetsu. The illusion shattered into so many pieces, shimmering in the air like painted glass as it fell away to reveal the truth. Aizen had not initiated the Bakudo. Aizen smiled again at Yamamoto. I knew that would not work against you, though it would have been nice if it had. But you have failed to notice something. And what is that? Aizen held up his free hand, which held a flickering, black, electric-looking sort of Kido. You gave me time to use this. Heido 90, Kurohitsuji. Black and purple lines quickly traced a tall box around Yamamoto, promptly filling the spaces between them with the darkness, obscuring all traces of Yamamoto save the arm that still gripped Eizen's arm like his life depended on it. Over a dozen spears, made of the same obsidian Ryatsu, also manifested onto the box before promptly spearing inside it. But then, the darkness shattered just as Eizen's illusion had moments ago, revealing Yamamoto. Eizen was unsurprised to see Yamamoto being bare-chested. He had focused most of the spears towards the torso to ensure the most damage, but he was shocked to see that the Sutecho was barely injured. There were scratches here and there, granted, but it seemed that the Kido had done almost nothing. "I am the oldest, most powerful Shinigami alive," Yamamoto growled, the flames of his Zanpakuto growing even stronger. "I created the Shinigami Academy over 2,000 years ago. I have had centuries, eons to grow ever stronger. Do you think that you are the first upstart to progress so far as to come to blows with me? It will take stronger Kido than that to defeat me. It is time to end this." Enetsu Jigaku. The pillars of fire from earlier, which Eizen had nearly forgotten in his fervor to escape Yamamoto's grip, grew even brighter and taller before shooting flames at each other, creating an inescapable barrier of fire that began closing in on them and growing hotter by the second. "Why are you doing this? You'll die too," Eizen exclaimed. "As loath as I am to admit it, I am growing weaker. Slowly, yes, but it remains the truth. I would rather die ridding all the worlds of a threat, permanently, than die on my deathbed as I watch my subordinates fight for my position. In any case, I can no longer be sure that simply cutting off your head would be sufficient to kill you, with the Hogyoku, and my technique will destroy that nuisance as well. Shoot to kill, Shinso." Yamamoto's head snapped to his left, and saw the former Taicho of the third squad lunging towards him, shuriken in hand as it lengthened at tremendous speed towards Yamamoto's skull. A split second later, Ryujin Jaka batted it away, towards Eizen in the hopes that Jin would accidentally kill the Hogyoku-infused Shinigami. However, Yamamoto was grimly unsurprised to see that Jin had snapped back his shuriken to dagger length before it could strike Eizen. "Eizen-san, allow me to assist." "Ah, thank you Jin, once you've freed me, the easiest way out of this technique should be to simply kill him." Yamamoto's scowl could have rivaled any of Kurosaki Ichigo's at that moment. He had two choices: hold on to Eizen and defend himself as best he could from a difficult position. It would be very easy for Jin to simply shunpa to the side opposite his Zanpakuto and strike him from there, or he could let go of Eizen and work on surviving long enough for his Enetsu Jigaku to finish. The decision was obvious. Yamamoto quickly let go of his deadly opponent and pushed himself off of Kyoka Suigetsu. "Jin, for your traitorous actions, your punishment will be to perish with your precious master." "Sorry, Yamamoto Sutecho," Eizen replied with a smile. But Jin was never here. Indeed, as the Sutecho was looking at where Ikimara Jin had been, he saw the shattered fragments of Eizen's illusion fall away. His expression murderous, Yamamoto lunged for Eizen, Ryujin Jaka's flames turning brighter as they took on a slightly more bluish tint in his rage. Despite the fires of hate and anger fueling his actions, Yamamoto did not forget to close his eyes and detect Eizen by way of spiritually sensing Kyoka Suigetsu. Behind his closed eyelids, the eyes glowed orange with the fire of his Ryatsu as he called his Enetsu Jigaku to continue. At his will, the ring of fire that had trapped Eizen and Yamamoto in the area pulsed, and as one shot flames across the ground. Sparks and smoldering ash peppered the air as the flames rose to consume the buildings. No longer was it safe to land anywhere. "Soon, my inferno will be complete. You will not escape from me, Eizen."